Hi,
Okay.
Craig. All right. So now we wait.
Yeah, I'll just be working on my own stuff while I wait for people to come. Or actually, how about Eli, how about I just start up DAO? Or oh, fuck no, I don't have my charger, so that wouldn't be. My battery might drain too quickly. Okay, I'll just be doing school stuff.
All right.
Or actually, hmm. Actually, how about? Actually, if you want to do something more interesting or TFF related, I could start up.
I
I
could
could
put
be
up
do
RP1,
R, RP1. What's RP1?
KSP Realism Overhaul.
Oh, I was thinking of bringing up like one of the sources I was going through.
Hmm.
Like, so I did say I wanted to read like the dinosaur source, but I think no, it actually does. It doesn't make sense to do like design right this moment. But I don't know. Should we be doing that? I could just be working on like event chains, but are you sure we want to make that something everyone can see?
Hmm. Hmm. Probably best not to. I think they'd also. I don't know. We could do like a little bit of some, and then when people start to join, we can.
Or actually, no. What? No. So my original suggestion is I wanted to like start going through like another source I need to like reformat into like a chronology because so you know how last year I read like the liquid hydrogen source. Well,
Mhm.
the notes for that ended up being like 60 pages, but most of it is just like,
Gee.
okay, on this date this happened, and I think I could trim it down quite a
Oh,
bit. Hey, my ass.
Hey,
hello. You're the first one here. That means you get to ask a question.
uh, what do you mean I'm the first one here?
Like the first non-dev here.
Yeah.
Ah, how how far along are you in the game?
Okay, I mean, we just finished like this significant redesign of the. I actually like a significant redesign of the gameplay. Like I think we may have shared it with you last month, but yeah,
TFF is a lot different than we first
yeah.
imagined.
Basically, we like I think we realized as we were developing the game that original idea that it would be mainly about like managing day-to-day budget expenditure that just wasn't really and you'd have like a very specific like budgeting process. We realized that number one, that isn't actually like very compelling or interesting gameplay, and number two, it isn't even like fully accurate because like a lot of the times budgeting can be like very ad hoc, like, or even you don't have you aren't able to like fully track all of the expenditures. So um that's why we kind of wanted to de-emphasize the budget part and put much more emphasis on like the organization management. So that's why we implemented like the org chart system where you have the ability to like reorganize not just the upper upper divisions of your organization, but even like stuff down to like the individual projects. Like each project in the game, like Project Mercury or what have you, will have its own associated org chart, and there'll be just like a ton of like throwaway characters that might not even appear appear as in like narrative sequences, but but will have like a mechanical effect on like how your project evolves. So if you can like reference the video we put up, think of it like the video we put up. So like there's all the org each in the org chart, there's like all these positions, and there's like different, and there's like each position has like a superior or like and subordinates. And so that we haven't implemented like some of the mechanical effects, but like who you put in each position will have like mechanical effects on like how the project is executed. It could affect like what if there's any like events that pop up, because another big part of like the gameplay loop will just be like reacting to if events that pop up during like the project development process.
And our actual system of attaining budget has kind of gone through a bit of a redesign. We always joke that TFF was part dating simulator. That is no longer a joke. That it is heavily a lot of the way you're going to get budget in the game is effectively relationships, because we realize that NASA doesn't really have well, NACA does not have a budget, really. They've got what they a little under what they can get just to like keep their head above water and nothing else. So they had to basically beg, borrow, and steal whatever they needed to for money.
Yeah,
So
it was especially an issue in like the early 50s, because like a lot of the funding was just going to like the Air Force, or or helping private corporations build their own test facilities. So the NACA was kind of struggling budget wise. Let's just say the Eisenhower administration wasn't very good for research.
So now, basically, the way you run out of money and then you go begging to people for more money is effectively the way our budget system works now.
Yeah.
Which I think will be a lot more fun. It'll be a lot more engaging to be more based on like actual people. Um, Especially God Emperor Lyndon Baines Johnson, blessed be thy name. But yeah, you're gonna have a lot more based on you're gonna have to pick and choose your battles a little bit more, and you're gonna have to build strong relationships with certain people, at least until public reputation becomes a thing. But we don't have to worry about that for a while.
Yeah, but then you have like the time scale. The public opinion of NASA will become important like after the original race to the moon, like so like after Apollo. But before then, it's like once you're during the moon race, like in general, you just have to worry about like, does the president and the Senate support what you're doing? But like then afterwards, you also have to worry much more about like what the public thinks of you. But that won't be really relevant for the demo.
Yeah. I mean, your relationship with the public, I mean, it's NASA was broadly popular, but in the 60s, but they weren't specifically popular. People didn't actually really like what NASA was doing. They just liked that we had NASA, which is kind of weird. But yeah, once the 60s started in the 70s, you're really going to have to worry about, because now we don't really have a national security aspect of it besides, the bare minimum. You have to argue, hey, this is important not just for the eggheads, but for the country, and people like it.
Um, I have a proposal, if you want.
Yeah.
Not for the game, but for the server. I know some servers with, I know 3 or 4 servers whose premise is similar to this. So I would recommend you guys partner so you'd get more engagement come in the future. I can
I mean,
send you the links, and you guys can
yeah,
talk
I
to
mean,
the, you know, if you want.
hmm yeah, go ahead. Just make sure if you send the link, make sure that they don't expire, because looking at the partnerships, a lot of the links here have expired.
Well, no, the point is, like, you arrange a partnership with these servers, you have a shot at it because they're doing the same thing as you, so why not?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the links in a bit, but I have a question.
Yeah.
TFF, I guess. Do you guys know anything about future weapons, future warfare? Because I'm developing a near future game, a game set in between 2020 and 2100. It's a geopolitical strategy.
I mean, I personally know some things, but to be honest, I don't think this discussion is the best place for that. I can talk to you on our own, but for now, I'd like to keep this for TFF.
Okay.
Mhm. And Bread Enjoyer, did you want to say something?
No.
While we wait for someone else to join, I'm gonna send you the links. Kutsa.
Okay.
We could mention so a while back, Misato stumbled upon the biggest treasure trove of information that we've ever found, which is really nice. But around that time also we made another discovery, which is going to have ramifications for TFF's development. And I don't remember if we ever brought this up, but it's the situation we found that NASA is in and NACA is in for the entirety of the game. Effectively, another
Okay.
reason why we. Hmm?
Sorry. So, how much are we allowed to give away?
I mean,
Go ahead. I won't say anything.
well, I don't. I was just basically going to tell them most of what we found, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it is public knowledge. It's not like a major spoiler or anything. Like, you can
Yeah.
just read a book source about it.
So we found out that NASA really doesn't have that much of a organizational structure. Um, Nobody really knew what was going on at many of the lower level facilities for, at the very least, the 60s. Though,
It's fucked up.
yeah, it's pretty bad. Goots, do you remember if we ever actually found out if they fixed it or?
I don't think we read further, but given NASA's recent difficulties, something about. Okay, so I did read that, like, in at least in like 61, there's like a big drama where like uh web kind of like reorganizes NASA in like 61, where like previously it was kind of like being a lot of it was just being run by Abe Silverstein as like this like informal seat of by the seat of his pants style organization management, but then he basically demanded, no, there has to be, we have to like take stuff out of Silverstein's office and make it like a bit more of like a formal structure. But apparently that was enough to like make Silverstein like actually like quit his position, go back to Lewis Research Center. And one of the reasons why that happened was because like apparently von Braun really did not get along with Silverstein, and if like and Silverstein wanted to not only be like, Silverstein basically wanted to be like the direct like the manager of the Apollo program and have all these like um all these like centers report directly to him, while Webb wanted to also have every single NASA center report to like the associate administrator, which that was Siemens's position. But Silverstein thought that would be like too much bureaucracy if all these centers had to report to two positions at once. So there might have been a reorganization, but like that's kind of indicative of like kind of like child challenges the player will face in the game, that the organization that NASA came from, the NACA, it was quite a decentralized organization where like it was mostly just like a federation of centers that were used to doing their own thing and occasionally like sharing results or coming together. But then like trying to turn that into like an actual centralized organization where like each center is assigned to this specific project and they all have marching order, that's a big challenge. And
Effectively, NASA is Yugoslavia.
yeah,
It really is a miracle how well it turned out. And do we want to tell them about the poison, as I like to call it?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
Here's how I'd put it: the better you do, the worse you do. Is an important motif to keep in mind when playing NASA in the 60s, because this system, like Yugoslavia, comes crashing down the second it's not held up in the way it used to be, is all I'll say.
yeah. I mean, I will say it look, from what we've read in like these sources, it's kind of clear that the Apollo program really was only successful because of like this power trio: Webb, Hugh Dryden, and Robert Siemens, who were basically like formed a troika and like kept everything together. But then after like Dryden died, Siemens left, and then finally like Webb resigned, that basically all kind of fell apart, and NASA started facing like significant management difficulties.
Which seem to exist even unto the modern era. So dealing with that is something the player is going to have to figure out. And we don't really have a hmm, how do I want to phrase this? I don't know really if there is a solution to it. I mean, there is, but I don't know how to if the player will have that real option. At least not in the 60s, because it's kind of a structural issue down to the core of how this organization operates. It's not just something you can change overnight. It's certainly not something you can change in the middle of, trying to get to the moon. Hmm. Hello.
Hey, got any questions?
Yeah. The Soviet space program it was interesting. I'll give it that. It certainly was a unique way of doing things.
Okay, I will admit, like with the Soviet space program, it got significantly better organized. Like once Glushko took over, like so it was like really bad, like in the '60s, especially after Korolev died. But then like Glushko kind of like took over and ended like all the rivalries and kind of created like a cohesive vision. And they did kind of turn things around at the end. Like they got Energia working, they're prepared to like and they're working towards like actually like building like a settlement on the moon. But then of course the Soviet Union collapsed, so that all of those plans fell apart. But I think had that not happened, they would have been like in a really good place going into like the '90s and 2000s. So again, this kind of underscores that like you're always the nature of like space. It is like very much a roller coaster, because there are times where like you're really have a lot of momentum, you have a lot of funding, you're riding high, and then like some stuff happens and it all comes crashing down, and you have to deal with like you have to roll with the punches basically. Like TFF in a way is a bit like Dwarf Fortress in that like we want losing to be fun. We don't want the player to have to feel like they have to like do everything perfect and win all the time, because it's fundamentally impossible for that to. So for that so yeah.
Losing is part of the experience. Get used to it, buddy.
Any other questions?
Maybe we should talk just a tiny little bit about what is I guess that's not really a formalized list, but we could mention a few of the presidents if we felt like it. Some of the unique choices.
Yeah. Let's just let me just bring it up again.
Are there any general doc in regards to CFF lore? We have one. And
yeah, it's work in progress. We need to obviously there's still some major gaps. Like I think after we release the demo, there'd be like a period where we just like try to read a lot about like Germany and Japan specifically, to like actually figure out like how a lot of like what the situation will be with the government and the military and the politics before we embark on a before we embark on content development, because there is like a ton of research we have to do.
yeah, we
Yeah.
have a we do have a general idea of how World War II went. I think is pretty locked down at this point, and we've got some ideas for the 50s.
Yeah,
and
we've got a pretty standard understanding of how World War II went.
yeah. We're not going to do anything crazy. This is an inherently ridiculous scenario, so we're not going to get into the bolt counting, I think is all of our opinion.
Well, we've tried to make sure that everything lines up where it's, some really dumb things have to happen for it to occur, but it's still like feasible,
Yeah, very unlikely, but it doesn't feel like stupid.
It's sort of the only thing that's really fucking stupid and would never happen is the bird thing. That's it. That's the only thing where we're like,
Bird is stupid, but Bird is fun. Bird is the whole point of the mod.
Bird is a literary device. Harry Floodbird.
Bird is a figment of our imagination, truly. Not actually. He was a real guy, but in a literary sense. He's a hallucination.
I
We
hallucinate.
want to talk a little bit about the Harry F. Byrd presidency, because I don't think we've actually gone into detail of what happened. Huh?
It's like if Harry Truman hated himself.
And was
It was also
overtly like super
incredibly-
right-wing on everything.
Yes, it's if Harry Truman was an asshole, more of an asshole, and also incredibly racist. Like, holy shit, dude, racist.
And also anti-labor and what other stuff?
It's bad. There's really nothing good to say about Harry F. Byrd.
Except for, I guess, like, continuing Rooseveltian diplomacy, but other than that, yeah, he sucks.
Yeah. Which is interesting. In this timeline, I do suspect we will have America and Latin America have a different relationship. Maybe a slightly more positive one for a while.
Yeah.
Different for sure. Because there is no Red Scare, and there isn't. I mean, there is a brown scare, right? A anti-fascist scare.
There is a Red Scare. There's still a Red Scare.
There's kind
still a
of
Red Scare.
it doesn't go all the way just because like people see it as like just Bird being like partisan, so it doesn't like fully entrench itself.
I don't think it's not like it's not spread from the federal government. It's explicitly like the same place it came from in our timeline, which is Tail Gunner Joe up there in Wisconsin doing his thing, which results in pretty much the same thing that happened IRL. How's the military divide?
I didn't bring this up. I had forgotten about it for a while, but
very
we do need to look.
Relationship. The military civilian divide in the U.S. is very, very complicated. There's a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas for what that relationship should look like when the game starts, right? Like when the game starts, NASA does not exist yet. When the game starts, you still have NACA. You're still going through all that. You guys there? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
My internet cuts out sometimes because of my fucking uni. But yeah, so the early developments would seem to push towards a more military-esque focus. But the President Eisenhower, really does not like that idea. Mostly because he has a bone to pick with it's 1957? 7?
Yeah,
57.
January 1st, 1957, and then it runs until 2030.
Whenever.
But
whenever we die. Whatever point we get up to and we all wither away.
Does the demo run until the end of 59 or end of 60? I keep forgetting.
The demo end of 59.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then we don't have to worry about the election.
Presidential election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the early developments in NASA's relationship with the military, while heavily dependent on what occurs in each run, generally follow the same general concepts. NASA is heavily civilian oriented. The Navy does not have a role in space exploration.
Fuck you, Navy. You suck
Yeah,
so much.
especially because
Vanguard's
of how they screw up Project Vanguard. Yeah.
Vanguard's a shit show. The only reason America's not the first in space is because of the fucking Navy fucking everything up.
The Navy is, as our good Lord and Savior Kelly Johnson once said, never work with the Navy. They never know what they want. They will always change what they want. They are the worst. Never work for them. Which, yeah.
The NRO doesn't exist at Game Start, but it is established in the early 60s, I think in 1960 or 61. It's around that time. But the NRO will be a major thing later on because the NRO takes over the CIA's role in space exploration, and the other intelligence agencies. So the NRO is eventually just going to be the main way the player interacts with the intelligence community and that sort of thing. The Air Force hates you. The Air Force hates that you exist.
Fuck you, they say to NASA. They beat you up, they take your lunch money,
in
they give you a
TFF
swirly.
In TFF, we're constantly debating, how exactly we're going to represent the Air Force properly, the extent to which the Air Force is directed by the player or not, because in TFF, I assume no army involved, because no, the army's very...
we don't have Von Braun. We just replaced Von Braun with this other person named Frank Joseph Molina, who's like actually a major character, but like we still have ABMA, and that's actually like central to the demo gameplay. We still have something like the Saturn V. It's just a different person who's making it.
Yeah.
By the way, if you steal
so,
any of these ideas, we have to kill you.
Yeah, we will hunt you down, behead you, we'll ship you off to Saudi Arabia or something, I don't know.
No, Siberia.
Yeah. Well, no, we don't have that kind of money.
You'll have to mine trees in Yakutsk.
You will export lumber for the TFF paper mine.
He's in America.
Yeah, he works for Caltech. So, by the way,
he's an American goddamn patriot.
No sense, NGP. That's awful. That makes no sense. NGP, what are you doing?
Truex?
NASA's admin are Depp and
Truex.
Okay,
Blame Lakeshore. This is why TNO should have just listened to me.
Oh no!
TNO listened to me. The world of TNO actually listened to the
need to wake up,
Biden. God.
That's
Panzer,
bad.
Wake up. Come back and
Panzer, you need to take your throne back.
Satellite to orbit in TNO2. That's fine. It's stupid, but it's fine.
Well, the Germans are stupid too.
Yeah, I mean, in order for that to happen, you just have to assume the Germans suck more. Like, that's it.
Which, is a fair assumption, all things considered.
Like, it's weirder for us to have the Germans orbit first, frankly. We only have that because of literary reasons, and we,
if that doesn't happen, the game doesn't happen. Sorry.
They'd never make Dryden admin.
Yeah, I mean, I will say what you're describing, the US gets into orbit first because the Germans didn't give a shit about orbital stuff. I will say that's
not really
kind of... okay, so I think the difference with TFF and TNO is in TNO Hitler is alive much longer than he should have, while in like TFF Hitler dies in 1948 and then Goering takes over. So then what happens is that in like 1955 Eisenhower announces the US will orbit a satellite, and then immediately Germany realizes Germany, who is like already
That's part of the UN. That's just part of the United Nations.
Yeah.
Have
we told them about the United Nations? How it's weird in this timeline?
It's cool and epic, and
this is the United Nations if they were based in Keed.
Yeah,
effectively
every Bircher's nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically the story is that like the United Nations announces this program called the International Geophysical Year in 1955, and the US says we're going to like orbit a satellite as part of that. Germany and Japan immediately panic and says, oh no, we can't, we need to like orbit a satellite as well. So Germany, like they launched crash programs of their own. Germany wasn't really doing satellite stuff before then, but they were well underway developing an ICBM. And then so just like in OTL on October 4th, 1957, von Braun's team manages to like orbit this like engineering test article that's kind of like Sputnik,
I
and
thought it
that.
was April. I thought we had it in April because of the whole Hitler
No,
thing.
it's
We changed
October. It's
that. We changed
no
it to
April was
October.
the April was the original like TFF, no TNO TFF thing.
Oh, okay.
But we did October just because it's more convenient and we wanted to
Maybe
tie.
it's the first ICBM. It depends on what you classify as an ICBM. That's a lot more difficult definition than you'd think.
Also,
okay,
I'd just
so
like to say,
Germany-
if you can't tell, there are some parallels between the German and Soviet space program.
No,
I
actually,
wonder if
no, I
this will be
wouldn't say.
important.
No, I think that's quite different. The Soviet space program was like very divided. Well, the whole shtick of Germany's space program is that it's like it's one cohesive thing that's actually a bit too big and
I mean,
centralized for its own good.
We don't have a proper A910 like a proper von Braun go fuck yourself machine. Because a lot of those designs are just really unworkable.
They're just bad.
Because those designs assume that like the very low specific impulses, but like by the early 50s, chamber pressures and engine technology had like improved enormously, so you could significantly downsize the vehicles required. So we're actually thinking that like Germany's first ICBM, which is also its launch vehicle, we call it the Skin Faxi. It's basically kind of like just this three-stage, LOX kerosene plus hypergolic upper stage. And it's like it has like a similar payload capacity to like the R7, but it's a bit smaller, trimmed down, like more usable as an actual weapon system. So,
I mean, if you want to be real about ICBMs, like I think Redstone is often considered the first ICBM, right? But it's not really an ICBM.
Yeah, it's not really a definition that actually means anything,
Yeah, it's just sort of it's difficult to say like, oh, it's the first ICBM. It's complicated.
Hey, it's fucking complicated. What do you want from me? Huh?
Yes, Cien. Sorry, I wanted to answer that. He's in the United States.
He's working at I just wanted. He's not working at NASA. He's at he works at Caltech, but because Caltech operates JPL, and he's also friends with Molina, which is important because like in this world, more like half of the leadership at Marshall Space Flight Center will be like Chinese who OTL founded China's space program.
We do have the X-15. We have the corporal and the colonel and the corporal colonel.
Okay. So we do have analogs to the Redstone and Jupiter. The Redstone analog is called the Major.
Thank you.
It's like a hypergolic system, but otherwise it's pretty similar. And then we have the Kernel, which is basically just like the OTL Jupiter, because that design was just like a fallout from the Atlas. So there's no like they had to use like an existing engine, and then they were very like constrained in their design. And then we still have our own version of the Saturn called the Ulysses, named after General Grant. And it's basically
and also an Odyssey joke because I'm funny.
Yeah, we're all very creative. If you want to know what event I wrote, look for a reference to Billy Joel or David Bowie. In there. Or Johnny Cash.
Or Atlas Titan still exists just like OTL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no difference in their development effectively. It would also be a nightmare to do it any different, so not gonna do that.
Cien is going to be do the Germans do something like the Saturn A1? Which one was the Saturn A1?
It was like the version that had like the Saturn 1 first stage, but then like a Titan as the second stage.
Oh,
or something silly.
Yeah, the miserable one.
I mean,
not work.
I will say that Germany, like, they will have their own super heavy lift vehicle that once it's fully upgraded and that like I do think von Braun is planning for hydrogen upper stages after the first moon landings because he wasn't so like a fully upgraded like German vehicle might actually like have a higher capacity than the Saturn V, but it also the thing is that because of Germany's like latitude, you need like more delta V to actually like get to the moon. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. So you kind of need a bigger vehicle, a slightly bigger vehicle in general.
I'm pretty sure the X-15 in this one is based on designs advocated
From
by
Shressen, yeah.
yeah
But
by
yeah, so the X-15 is Chan's baby, and the X-15, the X-20, and our version of the space shuttle will be like Chan's baby in this timeline.
Mhm.
yeah.
There's some cool things we've decided you'll get to do with the space shuttle, but you'll have to stick around for 68 years when we get to that point.
At least it's not as bad as Arcturus. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I don't know why that gave me the fucking flashbang, but do you think they would have been able to, the Nazis would have been able to rebreed wild Autrochs or whatever they're called?
Aurochs?
Because
No.
that was like a thing they tried to do. That was weird.
I don't think they would.
Probably not.
Well,
no.
actually they might eventually, but it would be a
Yeah.
lot.
There's gonna be some weird shit like that I want. Like, yeah, they have these wild cows, but there's like 200 of them, and they just have them in a pen somewhere because nothing is good in Nazi Germany. That's a theme, by the way. Everything sucks.
My favorite
Yeah.
thing about the Ulysses is how the design is actually pretty much just the Saturn, because it turns out that like that's just kind of how it would happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you have to keep
There's
in mind
like-
the design. For if von Braun was left up to his own devices, he would have made a very different vehicle from the Saturn.
Yeah.
The vehicle we got was fundamentally a result of like where American technology was headed, as well as decisions by higher ups beyond like von Braun's control. So
Piano needs to pay me. I expect payment.
For mental damages, mostly.
Yeah, primarily. I expect payment for mental damages, reparations.
Oh, yeah. So, also, do we want to mention a little bit of our good friend Goldwater, or can I say a little something?
Nah, he's
Nah.
fine. Well, we don't need to talk
He's
about Goldwater.
We don't need to talk about Goldwater. I think he'll be fun. You
He's a
should
mystery.
definitely, when the full game is out, you should definitely choose Goldwater as your first playthrough. You will not regret this decision. You can trust me. I wouldn't lie to you.
Now that I think about it, Goldwater's presidency is actually pretty similar to what's happening now, just like slightly less chaotic.
Well, the thing is, Goldwater isn't as absolutely batshit insane.
Yeah.
He's just stupid.
Yeah.
Goldwater is just a profoundly dumb individual.
Such horrifying things.
Goes to a place that depends on the TVA. The TVA sucks, by the way. Fuck you.
Fuck you,
What a
TVA.
man. Yeah, Werner von Braun, the more I learn about him, the less smart I think he is what I like to say. I don't know.
Well, the thing is that he's not really, like, a natural. Does ARPA still exist in TFF? It will, yeah.
yeah,
The thing with von Braun is that he's not, like, a natural engineer. His primary talent is in management. He is probably the greatest manager this planet has ever produced. It is insane. So with von Braun, like, he has a charisma and an intelligence to him emotionally, that's very at odds with his, like, shrewder nature in regards to negotiations. He's damn good at what he does. He's fucking great at managing. And a lot of
He's
that
an
is
okay engineer.
And a lot of that is because he's fine. A lot of that is because of his experiences in the 1930s with the Reichs, whatever the fuck, the planet group, the German planetary exploration, whatever the fuck society. I don't know how it's translated. It's
the
been a while.
VFG.
The VFG, thank you, yes. And especially with Nebel, my favorite con artist.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah,
He
keep your
is-
eyes peeled for that character in the German.
You should
playthrough.
definitely put him in control of the whole German space agency. He's a trustworthy guy.
He's totally not just been kind of wandering around the Reich for like 20 years.
You can trust him. His name is Nebel. When has anyone with a name like Nebel ever done anything wrong? Yeah, there will be some really fun ways for you to totally break your space program, and I hope you guys run into all of them.
Design
yes,
dinosaur
dinosaur
exists.
does.
Yeah, and
yeah,
actually, not only will it exist, I think we're kind of mandating that it won't be able to be canceled just because like it's important for like our shuttle space setup because we're trying to justify the shuttle having a different design from OTL. And one way to do it is just like people get the experience operating the dinosaur, so they kind of know so they know that so that informs like how they conceive of the shuttle. The
Yeah.
in-universe reason why the dinosaur won't be cancelled is just because Germany makes extensive use of winged vehicles, so people think it's an issue of national security to at least like have an experimental like winged space plane so they can match the capabilities of the Germans.
Yeah.
Who
Dinosaur
breaks
will
the
be
sound? Who breaks the sound barrier first? I mean, honestly, I think it still might be like the US just because like I don't know if Germany was ready to like
Jaeger's an
Germany would-
asshole, by the way. Fuck Chuck Yeager. He's a prick.
What did Chuck Yeager do?
He's just a racist asshole.
Aww.
Although I do doubt the reports of his racism towards what's his name. I doubt that somewhat just because it doesn't really seem most astronauts are shit. Jaeger's not an astronaut.
And that's not entirely true.
Jaeger's not an astronaut, and that's why he's an asshole.
Astronauts are usually
That's not
pretty
true.
nice. I
Most-
can't think of
most
one bad
astronauts are
astronaut.
Now,
Most
most
astronauts are
astronauts
pretty
are
cool
just-
people.
Yeah, most astronauts now are just like scientists who they're not like these jock military people. That's not really a
even the
thing
They
jock
were
anymore.
cool back when they
people
did
in
that
the
too, for the
were
record.
cool. Yeah,
And even the
they
jock
were
military
still
people are cool. Like they're not.
No, they weren't. They weren't mostly shit. Most of them were cool people.
Yeah, they weren't shit except
they
for
were
Glenn,
heavily-
this guy.
Except for who?
Glenn.
Oh yeah, we hate Glenn.
Yeah, fuck Glenn. Part of the reason why we left TFF is they wouldn't let us hit. Who did we want to hit with a car?
Glenn.
Yeah, fuck Glenn.
Fuck
No,
Glenn.
actually,
that's
well,
not
okay, technically there weren't
That's
any
a lie.
objections to Glenn being dead, but like,
It's
I will
just-
say,
I mean, most of our problems were just that, like, the TNO team wouldn't allow us the creative freedom we needed to actually do space stuff. They essentially wanted us as just an advisory team, but that wasn't, like, feasible because I cannot say this enough. The teams know fucking nothing about space. Like, they don't get it.
They
Okay,
don't even
Brett,
know what a
like-
space is.
Like they put fucking Dryden as the administrator. Look at
Look what they did to my boy.
you.
okay, Brett, I just wanted to say the whole Glenn thing was a joke. We still have Glenn as like the first American to orbit the Earth
Yes.
because we wouldn't see why not. The whole
Glenn
Glenn
getting hit by a car.
We're just joking about Glenn being killed because in real life it turned out he was like an Epstein associated, like politically corrupt when he became a politician. So that's why.
What, you're telling me an
politically-
associate of the Kennedys was politically corrupt? I'm
Hey! I like a corrupt politician. I don't like a pedophile.
Alan Shepard also a shithead? No, he was just a Christian Scientist.
So a shithead, but a different kind of shithead.
He married into it
Oh,
and was born into
Okay.
it. It's weird.
Yeah, but like I will say to get so yeah, in general, like the TNO team, like not only did they not really understand, but they also I think they thought it was kind of like something they really didn't care about or really wanted
Which
to
is
think about in their
fine.
mod, which is
Which
fine.
is
There's so much stuff
fine.
going on
But
in TNO, but it wasn't
but if you
conducive to the
wanted,
story we wanted to tell.
yeah, and also like if you don't want to do space stuff, don't say you're gonna do space stuff. You fucking idiots. God damn. TNO was the
It was a
second
whole.
worst period of my life.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's the thing. There might
PayPal?
actually be something like Apollo Soyuz in TFF because the
We still gotta
Soviet
work
Union
on it
will
though.
eventually emerge as like a secondary partner to the US. So like there might be something like Apollo Soyuz in TFF.
Certainly not in the 70s though.
Yeah, no.
There's been
Japan
like
and American relations have a long way to
there's
go.
like a lot of there's been a lot of questions over like, oh, is Paulo Soyuz project possible with the Germans or the Japanese? The Germans, no. The Japanese,
No.
But what I mean by
perhaps.
Apollo Soyuz, I mean literally the US and USSR. That's what I mean by
Well,
that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
If you mean literally Apollo
not in
Soyuz,
the 70s.
absolutely.
That would be
Not in the
that'd be the
70s,
I
but
don't think Soyuz
Yeah,
will exist properly.
well,
no,
yeah, probably.
I think no, I think
I
the
think
Soviets
any
would still want a crew
I think the
capsule of
Soviet
their
design.
own, and by
Yeah,
the
but I think
70s
any
they might be
Soviet
ready.
design. Well, I'm not sure. I think any Soviet design. First of all, you have to understand just like how fucked the Soviet Union's been for the past 30 years. By that point, like
I
it's
still think they actually would make kind of a quicker recovery than you might be giving them credit for.
Yeah, I mean, this
You
is
know,
my idea as well. I do think by the 70s they do emerge as like a secondary space power in their own right, and they are
Mhm.
we'll
planning
have
to
to
work
talk
with
about
the
that later.
Americans on. And
Kazakhstan, the beating heart of the
I'm
Soviet Empire.
I'm more a bigger fan of like a heavier Soviet return in the 1980s and having that as a big thing and coinciding
well,
that like opening
I
up
mean
and shit like that. But
that was my idea. That was my idea as well. But I think even like once the space race starts, like Korolev is still going to exist. He's still going to like be pushing for like the USSR to develop its own like satellite launchers and leading to like a manned program because they feel like this is that's they
but I
don't
think the
want the
political
Germans to
concerns are a
do.
lot. I think the political concerns are a lot different though, because the Soviet Union is cooperating heavily with the United States and shit,
Yeah,
right?
so
Like
With the
that would be the
United States.
that would be the motivation. They feel like they
the
want
Soviet
to
Union
like be
truly is
working
the
on this.
51st state,
Yeah,
It is unironically almost at some points.
or I guess
Not
the
really,
yeah,
not at all.
49th state at game start because Alaska
Yeah,
wasn't.
the
yeah.
Soviet Union is going to be a weird place because America, they're still like, you know, a
What is
communist
APAS
nation, but
again?
also America has a lot of influence in them. It's weird.
What is
And also, they
APAS?
might owe their literal whole country to the United States.
I can't wait for McDonald's in Moscow.
Well, no,
McDonald's in
Moscow's
Moscow
captured, but
happens in like 62.
In
Not
no,
German
but
Moscow. McDonald's like
Wait, yeah, you're right.
Reich McDonald's.
Yeah. Reich Donalds.
McHitlers.
Yeah, no, honestly, when there should be a Mick Hitler's. I feel like that's
well,
something the Germans
that
do.
actually reminds me. Back in like 2018, I was in like this server for like this Hoi 4 mod called Kulturkrieg, and in that
All right,
timeline, they
yeah,
were having Himmler be like founding like an alt history KFC. It's very
yeah,
weird.
yeah. It's very good.
Um,
Very, yeah, everyone loves Culture Krieg. I've played Culture Krieg. It's okay.
there is yeah, the Soviet Union though, I am in a little bit more favor of like a 75 return just because I kind of wanted something different to happen in the 80s, which I don't know why I'm being cagey about that. I think I've mentioned it before, but yeah, the kind of African revival I thought was gonna be in the 80s, kind of coinciding with the thing that happens to that other country. That one will be cagey about.
The Rhodesia thing or the Namibia thing?
No. Well, no, the Rhodesia thing happens in like 58. That's in the demo.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Rhodesians rise up and they get.
The total destruction of the cracker race by the glorious United Nations.
Yeah, no, but there will be it'll be in the demo, so I might as well tell
Wait,
it.
wait, hold on. The revolution is happening. That thing is happening in the demo. I thought it happens in
I
the early
think calling it a
60s.
revolution is a bit of
Yeah,
a
it's a bit-
No,
of
not a
a.
revolution. Not a revolution, but like
I don't know. We'll figure it
thought the
out.
Rhodesian uprising happens in the early
You gotta
60s.
fucking order a pizza.
I couldn't remember if we put it in 62 or 58. I was kind of thinking a demo would be fun, but it
Your
doesn't
mother-
really matter that much.
It matters to me.
I don't think it matters in the sense of timing, you know.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think 62 would also work better because it would kind of coincide with stuff like any potential Congo crisis. So, because like
Yeah.
in general,
Oh,
while
yeah,
there
you're
won't
right.
be like
the
a
Cuban Revolution.
Vietnam,
Yeah.
there won't really be for a Vietnam War for the U.S. Like the 60s will still be like a kind of like tumultuous period where the
we
U.S. has
talked
to
about
grapple with
how
stuff like
we talked about
decolonization and
how
like the
we
third
talked about
world
how
and other
the Congo
stuff.
crisis. The Congo crisis is essentially the closest thing to a Vietnam analog we have. Like it produces
And
a
it's
lot.
not a very good Vietnam analog.
It's a very different. It's a very different war with very different causes, but you have a lot of the similar resentment going on of American leaders.
Yeah, like
which
this
is
whole
going to be
third
a
world
weirdly
ferment.
a much different continent than in our timeline, mostly because at least in some regions there will be a genuine like rapid industrialization and modernization for a multitude of different reasons. Primarily because we don't want to buy everything from Japan. Primarily because America wants to separate itself from Japan. Because Japan and America are kind of in a weird spot where Japan needs America, America needs Japan, but America has a much greater chance of not needing Japan if they do play their cards right. It also depends on, some other things.
And the reason why the United States needs Japan is because Japan has the entire East Asian market pretty much, except for Australia and those areas. It's just a bad scene.
Yeah. They're like have this unholy codependent relationship. It's really cursed.
It's bad, folks. But yeah, Africa will be very interesting, I think, and we might.
Yeah.
I mean, we might at some point have an African space program. I'd like it. It's something I kind of was thinking.
I will
of.
say
It would be in
this whole,
the 80s and 90s.
I will say
Yeah,
this whole
it would probably be
emphasis
80s.
Yeah. I will say this whole emphasis on Africa, it's not just like some random political bullshit but it's also something directly relevant to the player because like a lot of like the raw materials that are fueling like, the technological civilization that your program directly depends upon come from Africa. So you actually do have to worry about the situation there.
TFF is deeply woke. I'd like to point that out.
What are you saying, GP?
Is there going to be anything similar to Latin America regarding
No!
the conversation on Africa?
We hate Latin
Sorry,
America.
the microphone's crap. I'm driving right now.
South America. No, okay. Latin America is probably going to be a much different situation just because America, in a governmental sense, doesn't have the Truman Doctrine is kind of never really. I don't want to say never established, but it's focused against fascism, and it's a lot more green revolution than it is Guatemala or Ecuador or whatever one we could in 54.
I will say in general but there might be like specific exceptions, like even Guatemala, just because you have cases where like, oh, it turns out Alan Dulles has a ton of connections to the United Fruit Company, and like, he has eyes here, so who knows, there might be an exception, but like, yeah, in general, the relationship will be a bit different. And we actually have considered like Brazil as a potential playable nation, just because Brazil is like a very important partner.
United States-Argentine relations have never been more fucked than they are in TFF.
There will probably be a direct, like, military invasion at some point.
No.
Throw it out of the cards.
They've got their eyes on them.
I would say that could be a possibility in some timelines.
Brazil is nowhere near the independent player that it is in TNO.
Brazil is like pretty heavily welded to the US, and they might even be, again, we might have a space content for them.
Like,
it's weird they made Mexico so independent. That was a weird choice. I still don't understand, the logic
why
behind that.
Which country?
Mexico and TNO.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's interesting.
It's kind of weird. Like, I don't think so.
TNO sort of imagines, like, what if these international globalist organizations, like, if that doesn't happen because, the nationalism of the 30s sort of defeats it. TFF sort of argues that sort of globalization, while not
was always going to happen,
well, not inevitable, would in fact coexist with the new order, right? Like, the world of TFF is a world caught between two ages, and unsure where to go, right? You are stuck between the age. This is something that happened to IRL too, but TFF has flipped where national.
This is also why, I kind of supported the idea of a possibility of there being almost never-ending social democracy in the United States, because that is America's 30s. It's not happening, but
I will say,
like, the New Deal happened, we're all fine. The reaction against American liberalism is, it's gonna happen.
I mean, I
kind of envision it as more of a culturally nationalist than a,
we have Chairman Earl Warren in the Supreme Court, all that good stuff.
I mean, I will say it again. It depends on, like, various, like,
an idiot.
It depends on, like, various, like, economic, if neoliberalism ever actually rises to prominence. So I will say, Eli has said that, like, if you look at the geopolitical situation, the US might not really undergo, like, a true, even if, like, something happens in the Middle East, there might not be an oil crisis for the US, because the US isn't dependent on Middle Eastern oil supplies. And the oil crisis was, like, a big factor in the rise of neoliberalism, OTL. Yeah.
I disagree with the notion that the United States would not undergo an energy crisis. I really do feel like the sort of stagflation and then energy crisis stuff that made up much of the 70s, that is that's going to happen, but it's going to be a very different circumstance. TNO actually has it occur earlier than I feel like it would.
Because
of Italian stuff, I believe.
Yeah. And we also have Italy. We also have Italy heavily involved in the Middle. But that relationship, I think, is very different than it is in TNO, where it's, like, explicitly colonial in TNO. There's sort of like
I think we should replace the oil crisis with something similar in effect, but different, because it wouldn't be oil. It just wouldn't.
So instead of, like, having the trucial states be, like, switching over from from British to Italian, like in TNO, you'd have, like, say, like, a United Arab Emirates that just so happened to be very pro-Italian.
That's essentially the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the Italians, for instance. The Saudis fucking love Italy.
They basically just spit in America's faces and go, "Fuck you! I'm working with these guys. They're way cooler."
The major issue that we do have to figure out is sort of the Israeli-Palestinian elephant in the room.
God, don't even fucking...
That shit show is,
Imagine
That's
it being so much worse in so many different ways.
Yeah, I don't
Is it
know.
still
There's so
TBD,
much more
or is it sort of like
to.
how TNO?
I think I think we
It's
should just
TBD.
have it be nuked.
It's TBD. In my eyes, it's TBD right now, just because.
Yeah, it's so
Um,
sensitive because not only because of real life events, but also because of like the nature of this alt history timeline. Like on the one hand, we don't want to be like, bootlicking Israel, but on the other hand, we don't want to be like making it look like the Nazis that were right. Like, what do you do?
yeah, like,
Yeah.
and like, the issue
Israel
is
will
that
probably exist as an Italian puppet state, won't they?
That was my thought as
God.
well, to be honest.
That's the thing, because Italy does not have an explicit interest that's very different from the British interest, in sort of preventing a total, like, a Holocaust on the Palestinians or on the Jews, vice versa. And they have like that same desire to keep things stable in the region, and that involves like balancing the interests of Israelis and Palestinians. So we're gonna have to figure out like how those interests are going to be balanced, and it's not going to be in a colonial administration, right? Like
Yeah,
after a certain point, I mean, initially it is like initially in the 40s, after the end of the war, like that is a colonial relationship, but that relationship has to end in the 40s, early 50s. It like because is like Israel, the Yeshua, like the people of Israel were going to fucking revolt eventually. They were not very fond of the British. And they're certainly not
How
very
many
fond
are?
of the fucking Italians.
You guys worked with Hitler? We don't like you that much.
And like
Look, unless you're
there's
talking about like really weird people like Begin or like the Leahy, those people might be into like Mussolini, but like other than that, no.
I disagree. I don't think they would. Um, I'm very against the portrayal in TNO where they had like an openly national socialist Israel. That wasn't really accurate to Israel's.
I'm pretty sure that's gone now.
I know it's gone, but I'm against it anyway, and I'll hold it over your heads forever.
The kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll hold it over your heads forever. I think that the situation in TFF in Israel is largely because Italy wants to keep that region stable, because if it's not stable, nothing around it is stable either. So we essentially have to figure out the best way for the Italians to do that, and what that would mean for the Israeli response. Because Palestinians, I think pretty much, as long as they have some form of autonomy, regardless of what that relationship is like, I think that would be respected by the Palestinians, because until 1947, they are the majority, right? They're the majority in the region. Israelis, I think Israelis are going to be much more like not content to exist in a subservient role, because it's not a position you want to be in, right? If you're
Which is
a
reasonable considering the situation.
If you're a Jew living in the Middle East under the British, you fucking hate them because you're either a Zionist or your family's been here for fucking ages, and the British are doing a piss poor job of protecting the members of your community from from inter-community violence in the region, right?
It's not like the French were any better either.
Yeah, the French are in, I don't care about
The French are the French. They're awful about everything. They don't know how to do anything.
Fair enough.
So in
the Middle East.
So basically in the post-war period, the situation between Italy and Israel Palestine is going to change radically. We just haven't figured out how. And I don't want to do what TNO did, where they just kick it off until the 60s and then have the decision made. That decision would have already been made in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, I think that's like a legacy thing.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in TNO is legacy, like, oh, we want everything to happen at
Hitler
once.
being alive.
Yeah, here's the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s all in one decade.
Have fun, motherfucker.
In TFF, we want to make it feel more like there's a sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a ton of
that
stuff
is
that's
also a big thing in TFF. You know, the idea of progress is a huge cornerstone of the game, not in just like a progress forward, but also progress backwards. We haven't really talked about our research system because it's very much work in progress, but it'll be very weird. It'll be different from anything you've ever played before, hopefully.
We're trying to... I am at eternal war with the concept of progress, because
as a Catholic.
As a Catholic, because none of this is linear, right? This is not like a linear, straightforward narrative. The only thing that is linear in TFF is time. Nothing else is linear. There's no like straightforward go to A, B, C, D, E. You have a ton of different events occurring at the same time, interweaving in different ways.
If everyone really fucks up, you probably could get a moon landing, like the first moon landing in like the 80s. That would be the worst timeline. Like just the nightmare timeline.
Would be pretty bad.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's nothing is guaranteed. I think is a big theme. You know.
Yeah, big theme is like you have to fight for the future. You have to fight for things to occur, you know, and that like there's a tendency among people to sit back and let things happen, and the results of that are that nothing.
Well, look outside your window today.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Love Hitler too. Big fan of Hitler. We love
Hitler too. We love Hitler too, but this time he's South African.
Oh,
so
man.
Yeah, honestly, not surprised.
George Wallace should
also like just painfully horrible at charisma. Who the fuck this? I'm gonna die. At least Hitler was charming in some way to some people.
I can't wait until I get
Please
to
don't
argue.
Take that clip out of context. Please
Can't
don't
wait to argue in TFF in the 2000s that we should have President Chuck Schumer.
I'm gonna die.
Big fan of President Schumer.
I will fall upon my own sword.
We don't have a Wallace presidency in TFF. That's not a thing.
Yeah, Wallace just wouldn't win. There's no way he wins.
Yeah,
Wallace it is an impossibility for Wallace to win.
Wallace is a sectional politician, which makes him impossible to.
Of course, unless you hit up, down, back, right, and unlock Shirley Chisholm Wallace ticket.
Yeah, of course.
I
like the idea of Wallace being the vice president on that ticket.
Yeah.
Just
he's in a wheelchair.
Black woman president, and then just a segregationist.
Look, I know, you know, he used to say some bad things, but he says he's changed, guys. I trust him on this one. Chisholm, I don't think this is gonna work. No. Trust the plan.
Where is my
presidential flowchart?
Yeah, where's my chart?
We could show that. Do we want to reveal the chart to the plebeians?
Nah, not right now. Fuck them.
Yeah. Plus, we might end up revising it.
No, we will. There's going to be constant revisings.
RFK is eternal. Fuck you. No, everything will change.
Nah, fuck it. We'll show them a little bit.
Why not? Let's show them it. If it changes, it changes. Whatever. Who cares?
Where is it?
Okay,
it's
sure.
our game.
Where is it? Do we know where it is? Because I don't fucking
Yeah,
know where it is.
I'd like to say this on behalf of the whole TFF development team. We owe you nothing, worms.
Frankly, you should
no,
be
we love you
paying
guys.
us. We're doing all this shit for free. I should be given $500.
Should
every
be given
day,
3 kidneys a
every
year.
hour. Where's my fucking
3 human kidneys. Where is that presidential chart?
Is it in documents?
Worms, brainworms, RFK reference. Yeah, so can I tell them about well they'll see Goldwater in a second, so I'll tell them. Goldwater's probably the funniest presidency in my opinion. It is a shit show. It's Donald Trump and Joseph Robinette Biden.
What's
is
it called?
I think the
Notepad.
best combination.
Notepad ++. There it is. Presidents. Here it is. I just called it presidents. Cool.
Make sure it's the updated one with our boy.
With what boy?
All of them. No.
Oh, that's right.
Trump Biden 2020. Trump Biden 2020 is unironically a totally valid ticket, which is the worst
No, it
part
wouldn't
of
be
what you just
2020.
said.
It was
Not
2020.
2020. Yeah, I meant 2000.
Trump
Biden
2000.
2000.
Not a valid ticket.
I like it, they're not gonna win, but you know,
Not
I see
happening.
nothing.
Anyway,
It's not happening. I'm not saying it's gonna, but like, you know, it would be a ticket. Yes, let's see our good friend, the presidential chart.
Is this the right one or is this? Oh no, that's the normal notes. Give me a minute. Where's Notepad? Is this it? Or is that just the window? Where?
We're very well organized here, by the way. I hope you guys know that.
Oh, is this it? Is this it?
Let's see.
Yeah, is this the?
Yep, this is it.
Okay, which one was it? Was it the base take or my proposal?
Masada's proposal was the new one because that's the one
Right.
with
Yeah.
Yeah, so 1960, Nixon v. Kennedy. And then of course it splits into two depending on who wins.
who knew campaign trails.
New campaign trails. Yeah, so in 1964, if Nixon wins, you have Nixon versus Stuart Symington of Missouri. Wow. If Nixon wins a second term in 1964, then it is William Scranton of Pennsylvania versus Hubert Humphrey. He used to be a senator. You
Might
may
have heard of him.
And then if Scranton wins, he runs again in 72, and we don't know who his opponent is yet.
Yeah,
Fuck
probably.
you.
I don't know. I don't know. Ted Kennedy. Why not?
Hitler. 1972. If Humphrey wins in 68 against Scranton, he runs again. 1968. If Stuart Symington won in 1964, denying Nixon a glorious second term, then it is Ronald Wilson Reagan of California versus the incumbent Stuart Symington of Missouri.
That would be a fucking great race to watch, man. Just banger.
If Reagan wins in 68, he runs again in 72.
Wow.
And then if Symington wins in 68, we don't know what happens. We don't know who runs.
God kills you.
God kills you. You
I
die.
assume there's a 22nd Amendment.
Yeah. There
Okay.
is.
Sadly.
All right.
Worst amendment. Don't at me. Worse than prohibition.
1964. If JFK won the presidency in the year of our Lord 1960, and 1964, it is John Fitzgerald Kennedy versus Barry Morris Goldwater.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of him. Also, LBJ is still the vice president.
Yes. Because it's Johnson. He's never not being the vice president.
In 1968, if Barry Goldwater won in 1964,
He fucks up so badly.
Yeah, he can't run again. Goldwater only ever gets one term.
He effectively he just nukes everything, and it's awful, and not even in like a funny way. He's just garbage.
It's beautiful. I love appointing Curtis LeMay to be NASA administrator.
Yes, that is who's.
Oh
that
god,
is,
it's going to be a shit show.
It's so
we
good.
we haven't mentioned the ace in the hole, so I'll keep him in the back pocket.
Yeah. So, if Goldwater wins in '64, it is George Romney of Michigan versus Robert F. Kennedy.
He's back, motherfuckers.
Yeah, so JFK dies in the late 60s. I think it was 67 we had because of his declining health.
For Goldwater, we basically just have it so the only reason he wins is because Kennedy totally just gets all of his medical records revealed, and people are like, dude, what the fuck?
Hold on. If in 1968, if Kennedy dies before, like, the election in 68, wouldn't that just mean that, like, LBJ could end up running for president in 68 because he becomes president?
Nobody likes LBJ.
LBJ runs after, nobody likes LBJ in the timeline where he lost.
No, but I'm thinking if Kennedy serves out to like 67, he dies, LBJ becomes president.
Yes.
Can't he run in 68?
Yeah, that's who is running currently. That's one of our.
No, it's not. It's Robert.
Is it not?
Oh,
no.
Wait.
No,
yeah, it is. If Kennedy, this timeline is if Goldwater beats Kennedy in '64.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's Bobby, who basically will be motivated by the fact that he hates Goldwater with a burning passion. He wants to hang Goldwater.
If Romney somehow wins in 1968, he runs again in 72. If Robert F. Kennedy wins in 1972, or in 1968, he runs again in 72.
He'll probably I think he should run against Reagan. I think that would be a fun matchup.
The two-term JFK timeline, JFK wins in 1960 and in 64. In 1968, you have Richard Nixon back with the steel chair versus Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Whipping his cock in glorious fury.
A clash of the titans. The greatest presidential election in human history.
Yeah.
Two assholes duking it out.
Two of the worst guys you know. What a fucking one for the ages. I kind of think we should have Nixon. I would like at least one timeline where it's RFK versus Ronald Reagan. I think that's a fun matchup.
It's not happening.
I hate you. I hate you so much.
I hate you.
Why not? Why can't?
I don't know. Fuck you. But yeah, and then of course, if Nixon wins, he runs again in 72. If Johnson wins, he runs again in 72. And yeah, those are the options in TFF right now. So you can have some really beautiful presidencies, Nixon Reagan, Nixon Johnson, Nixon Humphrey, Kennedy Goldwater Nixon.
Does LBJ still order his pants?
That's the first timeline. Nixon Scranton, Nixon Humphrey, Nixon Symington Reagan, Nixon Symington, Kennedy Goldwater Romney, Kennedy Goldwater Kennedy Nixon, Kennedy Johnson.
Yes, LBJ will still whip out. Okay, actually, I don't know if we want to depict that in the game because that's like not safe for work. But like,
There will be a von Braun sex scene, though.
That's a joke.
Is it? It is.
Yeah,
Anyways,
is it? Okay.
just like a fully
The worst thing that will be in TFF is the Ronald Reagan, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. makeout.
That is true.
I'd like to say for the record, even if RFK wins both terms and lives until his like 90s, his son still turns out like a freak.
He probably wouldn't actually. He'd probably be very different.
No, he wouldn't.
His dad's death did a lot.
Yeah, which fair enough. Having your dad shot makes you a weirdo. No, but yeah.
RFK Jr. develops a vaccine.
Honestly, I think RFK Jr. will probably be a presidential option if his father wins. I see that.
I doubt it. I don't think he has the juice.
I don't know. Maybe not.
We'll see. I don't think the Kennedy dynasty is going to be I think the Kennedy dynasty is going to die like it did OTL, like in the 2000s with the death.
I think it dies with Ted, basically.
It dies with Ted.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the.
Which, to be fair, you can get 3 two-term Kennedy presidencies, probably.
I can't wait for eternal Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, Ted Kennedy repeals the 21st,
the greatest,
yeah,
the greatest TFF timeline, the timeline where
Chairman
you get
Kennedy.
all three.
We should have
three Kennedys.
We should have an event for that, just called Candy, Candy, Candy. After like the jingle
Kennedy,
and the
Kennedy.
I do feel like in a Kennedy timeline, we kind of do have to admit that, like, okay, it sticks around at least a bit longer because that's the most impressive political dynasty ever.
We are going to have an Orbit Nixon Now event, though. God, I
would that still happen without
an RFK Jr. event?
Would it happen without Von Braun?
The Orbit Nixon Now joke? Oh, I don't know. Probably not. I doubt Molina would say something like that. That's a very Von Braun thing to say.
That would be more like Orbit Spear. That would be more Orbit Spear now or something like.
Probably.
Yeah,
Spear would probably do that. He seems like a cool guy. Besides the whole Nazi thing.
Besides the whole, Hitler.
Yeah, well, that's not cool. But maybe if he didn't go down that path, he would be like I feel like he would hang around like.
He's chill. He's just a Nazi, but.
Hey, I didn't say he was chill. I said without the Nazi thing, he might have been chill. Who knows? Who knows?
Chat, is Hitler chill?
I didn't say that. That wasn't my claim.
Yeah,
don't misrepresent my claims.
I think we've shared this in text before, but like with Germany's political situation, at the start it's like Goering's a Führer, but then like in the early 60s he suffers a very like humiliating death due to like his habits, and then there's like 4 successors: Speer, Bormann, Goebbels, or Himmler. But I will say their depictions will be very different from like their TNO characterizations, because we have certain issues with like how Germany is characterized in TNO. Like for instance, Speer will actually be like the most conservative of the Führers. Like he just wants to like make the system work better bureaucratically.
He's not reform. He's reform or die.
That's more, yeah, like the whole like radical. Oh, I'm going to reshape everything. That's more like what. To some extent, what the others do. Goebbels is like the most prominent, like quote unquote radical reformer, but
Goebbels, the progressive figure.
he's more like what Speer is in TNO, but his economics are different.
Yeah. Japan is also really interesting. The Japan player is probably gonna want to put a fucking iron in their mouth half the time, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, the whole shtick with Japan is that like all the functions that should be under one agency are under 2 agencies. They're not like rivals, but like it's not ideal. And also
fun.
Army thing and a
The fact
Navy.
that no, so the thing is that like the military space program is barely
Oh wait,
held together, and it covers both the Army and the Navy, but that's only possible because they kind of have a committee structure, kind of like what the NACA had. So it's very like non-cohesive and disorganized. Like you have all these different voices shouting in your ear, and it's like really hard to get to like stick to a path. There's no. So that was my conception, at least.
Yeah, Japan is an interesting time.
It's probably the
pretty fun.
hardest out of the three superpowers to play, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. It's also probably the one with the most direct deaths responsible. Yeah.
You are going to be able to do some interesting stuff involving like certain high energy propellants.
Do you care about Chinese lives? Because the Japanese government doesn't. Yeah. I said this in the last Q&A, and I liked how I phrased it, and I want to say it again. You know, the Soviet Union had a laxer safety structure, but, you know, in the end, they didn't care about the people working for them. Japan doesn't. Those are not Japanese citizens. Those are not Japanese people. They don't matter. They are... You can kill them. And nobody really will care.
To some extent, they still need to like preserve a skilled workforce, so it's not like really over the top. But yeah, they don't really value like, you know, the well-being of some of the menial workers they have employed in their space program. Mm-hmm. So they're able to. So it's whatever they can get away with without like totally crippling their program. They will.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're only endangering people that they can easily replace. Because, you know, China's a big country. If you haven't heard.
Well, not just China. It's Korea. It's like all the other countries. It's
Japan. The Japanese space program will probably be the most like.
Deadliest.
Of course, the Nazi one is the most immoral, but they're the most directly immoral, if that makes sense. Like, your actions are worse.
The whole narrative with Germany is that like all of the German the German space program kind of like lives in its own bubble, where like it's kind of like the zone of interest where like all of the characters can basically pretend like nothing's going on because they live in their own like comfortable gilded cage. In Japan, like you don't see any of that. Like you're directly witnessing all of this horrible shit happening in your face, and you can't look away from it.
The German player is that one image of the guy going, "I love being a morally neutral civilian," and then going to my job, and then the job is the Death Kill Array 9000.
Nixon goes on the dinosaur. Okay, the dinosaur is too military, but I mean, to be fair, in real life, the space shuttle did take multiple Congress people to orbit, so you could have events where like a politician flies as like a guest astronaut.
Mm-hmm. I do think that's a fun bit. It's like a pathetically low amount of favor you get too, but it's still like barely worth it.
One of those people was Bill Nelson. God bless.
Oh God. Oh yeah, I also wanted to look in. I heard from somewhere that McCarthy might have had actual connections to the Nazi Party. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard it. And it sounds about right. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know. I think it was just like a weird conservative crank. Like, yeah, I don't know. We'll have to do some investigation. But like, to be honest, with this whole like Red Scare stuff, I do admit we have to keep it a bit more limited than what happened to OTL, just because like some major characters in the US, like Molina and Chen were like former members of the Communist Party. So if there is like a sweeping purge like OTL, they'd be, you know, out of a job or in jail. So we have to like find an escape clause for them.
And it does kind of make sense because, you know, America is literally letting the Soviet Union live. So, you know.
Yeah, so any like Red Scare stuff is more of like, okay, this is like just a political climate where like the Republicans want revenge after decade, like almost more than a decade of like FDR Rooseveltian domination. So
I do feel like McCarthy would get taken down a peg pretty quick, though. I don't feel like it lasts anywhere near as long or gets anywhere near as severe.
yeah.
It's a lot less mass hysteria, right? Like, cause the Red Scare and I timeline, that people were genuinely on the street concerned about this. I don't see that really happening as much in TFF.
Yeah, because I don't see communists as like a threat compared to like, you know, what's out there. So
Yeah, man, this communism thing's pretty crazy. There are Nazis. Like right there.
and there's also the fact that like in the TFF timeline, the progressives are more closer to that thing. They're the one, like people like the communists are the mainly the main people leading like the progressive resistance to the Byrd administration. So there are some people say, okay, yeah, fine, they're weird, but I also really hate Byrd and everything he's doing. So I'm
fucking
not
hate
going to
Byrd.
go hunting them.
So
Like,
God, Byrd.
Like in this timeline, the Progressive Party might win multiple states in 48 just because organized labor hates Byrd so much.
Byrd is honestly like it is. It would probably be like realistic to have Byrd get shot by an anarchist or something. Like that's how much people hate Byrd. It's pretty bad.
Okay, I think we're kind of exaggerating it because Byrd still has like a lot of support amongst like what Misato said, ordinary whites. I think that's how she put it. Like he still wins re-election in 48, so obviously he has like some appeal, but there also are like people who like really just despise him and for good reasons. NGP3 question is there any alternate facility locations for NASA and TFF? Like, say, is an alternate site to JSC on the menu? I'd say no, just because, like, for narrative reasons, like, it would be too difficult. Remember, we're writing for, like, decades and decades of content and having to, like, totally, you know, change the setting. I don't think that that's really viable. And it's also, you know, a bit easier to okay from an implementation perspective it wouldn't be that hard, but like from a narrative perspective it would be pretty hard. Yeah.
I think you're a lot more likely to see news centers.
Yeah, like one big divergence is that like in many timelines the electronics research center in Boston will last past the moon race and will actually have like an impact because, you know, if NASA is like a dedicated electronics research center that could like change the, you know, what's sort of like technologies are developed and like the timeline of things, which I'm actually really excited to get to.
We could also see, you know, I don't know where the original like nuclear facility, because all NASA's nuclear facilities were co-owned by whatever, right?
NASA's main nuclear research center was Plum Brook Research Reactor, which is operated by like Lewis, now Glenn Research Center. That's like in Ohio.
Sorry, it's not too far from Sandusky. Near like Cedar Point.
Yeah, fun fact that center, Glenn Research Center, that's actually where I did a NASA two NASA internships. So I have a personal connection, but yeah.
Yeah, but when if NASA gets nuclear engines, I would consider maybe a new position a little closer to the rest of them, just because, like, where they actually, because I don't think, who would actually make NASA's nuclear rocket engines? Because that seems like,
I assume it would be like Westinghouse or General Electric.
So, good old GE.
Yeah, they probably have a facility in the Midwest because it would be part of like their main nuclear reactor. I don't know. We have to do the research on it, but
Speaking of companies, are the big boys like say Lockheed, North American, Aerojet, Rocketdyne, etc.
Funny you
are
mentioned
those around?
Lockheed.
yeah,
Smiley
I
face.
will say we might end up having to like at least in the vanilla having to change the name so we don't get sued. But if we do that, then we'll probably just have a mod that changes the names to the real life names because fuck you. But
Lockheed Martin,
but I will say that yeah. So
Lockheed Martin.
all of the companies, all of those major companies have exist in TFS. Even Rocketdyne, which fun fact, Jack Parsons is working for Rocketdyne on the F1 and TFF. So that'll be an interesting story. Jack Parsons is was such a weirdo. It's gonna be very fun reading
Cuck
about
guy, right?
him. Yeah, he was the guy who was cucked by L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah.
What a individual, I must say. Truly, a specimen of humanity.
And in
A
TFF,
deeply silly one.
in TFF, he pals around a lot with like Robert Heinlein and all those other like weird sci-fi libertarian authors.
Mm. It's great. He's a character. He's also a fucking asshole. I hate that guy.
He unironically might be one of the founding members of the Libertarian Party in TFF.
He's such
that's
an
the
asshole.
vibes it gives off.
To continue on that previous question, is there any possibility for like any new companies to get into the action? Like say the big one I'm thinking of, Northrop.
No,
Because Northrop didn't get into space stuff until they bought Orbital ATK, like way down the line.
I mean, there's always proposals, like, depending upon, the personalities involved. Like, many of these companies, there's always engineers coming up with, like, proposals, but they never get, like, taken up. So, like, but things might be different, especially in like, past the 70s, because we're thinking of having, like, a bit of, like, a commercial space boom, like what happened in the 2000s happened in, like, the 80s. Instead, it looked like there was kind of like an aborted commercial space boom in the 80s, but it never really went beyond like very preliminary studies. But in TFF, the conditions might be right for like a true, rise of commercial space in the 80s and
Yeah, the
going
only
into
ones
the
I can
90s.
think of in the real life 80s were like Pegasus with Orbital,
Yes, stuff like that.
Conestoga,
Also,
stuff
you
like
might be
McDonnell Douglas, doing Delta II launches on their own.
Yeah, also there might be stuff like you might have a new thing from Robert Truax and one of Molina's people, but that's just like an idea.
Oh, and eventually with the shuttle, I think we were basically committed to this. We committed to it a while ago when we were thinking of shuttle first, but you'll get a lot of choices when designing shuttle. Some of them really bad. Don't do some of them. You can really fuck it up. But some are really cool, and some follow. Like Lockheed has the titanium shuttle they designed, which is something you can pick, which is a really cool idea.
And by the way,
um,
all of the shuttle designs, none of them have the shuttle riding on the side. They're all like
Mhm.
vertically stacked, and in universe, that's actually like because like people have experience from like the dinosaur and they realize it's better to do it that way because again the original shell design operated under the assumption that it could be like flown once a week and be like super easy to reuse, but the experience of the dinosaur basically like shatters those assumptions. So they designed a system that like works much more for like what NASA wants to do, not this weird utopian fantasy. Basically, what people think Starship is going to be now.
Probably not, for the record. I don't think so. But yeah, the shuttle will be a lot different in this timeline, which I think is good because if you had the actual shuttle, you'd just be
It would
sad.
suck. You spent about an amount of money comparable to the Saturn V on a vehicle that can only take 27 tons to orbit. It's really kind of sad, yeah.
As in design, like say, the SRBs, the external tank, the orbiter.
No,
I've seen
so
talking about it.
all of our shuttle ideas are much more like Saturn derived or Apollo derived than OTL. So it's usually like one first stage that's always recovered no matter what, and then you have a choice of like either a partially, like just a conventional second rocket stage that lifts like an unpowered shuttle into orbit as one possible configuration, or you just have like an orbiter that functions as like a second stage. So those are the configurations. The base shuttle is like ultimately Saturn 1 or in this timeline Ulysses 1 derived, but there might also be, if in like the more ambitious proposals, you also have a heavy shuttle that is like Saturn V derived. So it would be like a Saturn V first stage, and then you have like a powered orbiter as like the second stage.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
the titanium shuttle is a very cool idea that we stumbled upon, and it has some really interesting advantages. But you'll have to wait and see. And what's the other? I think there was something else with the shuttle, but I can't remember it right now. So, whatever.
I think what you were trying to remember was that like there are scenarios where like the shuttle doesn't actually like fully work. So for instance, especially with something like the heavy shuttle, there might be a situation where people realize it's actually they fly it and then something bad happens and realize, oh wait, this isn't a good idea. We should like just go back to an upgraded like Saturn 5, which basically which are calling Columbia. That's like the name we give to basically any like Saturn 5 style rocket that succeeds the Saturn 5 or so.
We've told them about our good buddy, old pal. I don't know if we've told these people, but we've told people about
Hayden?
For some reason, my brain isn't working right now. Icarus, right? Or
no, don't talk about. I know what you're talking about. Don't. Let's keep that under wraps for now.
Yeah,
I think.
I could have sworn we talked about that once, but yeah.
Okay, Miss Halo, is there anything you wanted to like mention?
No, I think I gotta go because I gotta keep working on. I gotta work on this essay it's due tomorrow, so I do.
All
have
right.
to leave.
All right.
But
See ya.
had a good time. You guys keep going. See ya.
Yeah.
Anybody? Any other questions?
Not really. Oh yeah, is EOR slash LOR slash direct descent still an option, or is it locked into one thing?
We decided not, just because like it's too marginal of a scenario, and also like forces us to change too much, and it just also wouldn't make sense with the logic of within the logic of the time. Like it,
All right.
yeah. I mean, at least not for the initial moon race. I mean, there are obviously other countries might, or later times might have moon mission architectures that use like direct descent, kind of like what NASA wanted to do in like the under Bush Senior with the Comet HLLV, and like that plan to return to the moon that was a direct descent architecture.
And then similarly with EOR with Constellation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the constellation architecture. That's what Germany uses. And I think Japan might as well. I I think it's, but they do that for different reasons. For Germany, it's just because like they want to use like a heavier lander and a heavier and like a heavier return vehicle, so that they can't launch it to the moon all at once. And with Japan, it's just that Japan initially kind of sucks at making like super heavy lift vehicles, so their moon rocket is more comparable to like the Falcon Heavy or that Chinese like Long March 9 extend, like what,
Long March
5
10.
Long
Oh,
March
four.
10, no,
Or 5. Yeah.
no, but
Sorry.
yeah,
Long
like
March
the
10
one
is
they're using for
Starship
not the, but yeah, so Japan kind of sucks at making very heavy lift vehicles, so they're just going to decide to assemble their moon missions in low Earth orbit because that's what they can get away with.
right?
At least
Japan
initially,
is
like
struggle.
obviously in the future they'll be pushing for like heavy, like proper super heavy lift vehicles, but like for the moon race, they can't really pull it off. What's a CFC?
Oh, oops, did not mean to delete that. It's I was gonna ask about it's the thing that was
And
destroying the ozone.
Hindenburg. Right?
Chloro, like the CFC, like
Yeah.
the ozone hole.
Yes.
Oh god, that's going to be like a whole can of worms, because like I think I'll have to talk to Misato about it, but like I don't. That might actually be like a significant challenge if because the international situation is what it is, and like to have this sort of like international unity to in this world to be able to like phase out CFCs across the board. Like I don't know if that would exist, which is a really scary thought.
Oh, also smallpox is never eliminated. That's just not happening.
And polio is probably still super widespread. Or polio.
Oh yeah.
I mean, polio could also
the
be
international
widespread.
effort to eliminate smallpox was probably the single greatest human achievement ever, and yeah, it's just not happening. In the Western world, it'll basically be eliminated, and everything, even in most of Africa, it'll be gone. But like in China or most of Asia, it's just not happening. So yeah.
So it's kind of like polio, IRL.
Well, no, polio is nowhere near as infectious and deadly as smallpox, but yeah.
I mean, I guess
there would still
like...
be major outbreaks in China, like up until their well, that'll come about later. You'll get to learn about that at a different point in time. But yeah, it's bad. Like that's a main theme of TFF. It sucks. Everything sucks.
Even in the timelines where you end up like going to Mars by the 80s, you still feel bad about it. Like,
yeah, misery is eternal.
It reminds me of that Stephen Baxter book, Voyage, where you have that like Apollo-derived mission to Mars in the '80s, but like, oh yeah, Nerva development turns into a complete disaster that results in 3 deaths.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling we're going for.
You can definitely kill a lot of people. No.
And
we don't
also
even know if we're doing that.
And also in the book, like, oh yeah, we're going to Mars. That doesn't mean we don't need to do shit like Voyager or Viking.
Fuck you, we're going to Mars.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I am.
It's a good book. I remember listening to
talked
an
about,
audio version of it that the BBC did back in the '90s.
Yeah, I have to read it at some point, but I would really like to.
We are definitely doing. Guta, can you remember if I've talked about Expedition?
I don't think so. It's fine. It's not really a massive spoiler or anything.
Yeah, I'll mention it just because I think it's cool. This is my baby, my child. I love it more than anything else. I will fight and die to keep it in the game. So in the so I found a piece of paper, which may just be a slight bit of dick swinging from JPL that basically says, yeah, we could definitely put a decent sized rover on the moon in they said that in 1972 when the Russians attempted after the Russians did their moon rover. But the difference is that this would be using, so it is a 2-step mission. One is 24/7, besides, when it is impossible to communicate with Earth from Mars, communication satellites and relay around Mars. And then one 20-ton rover on the surface of Mars. Because that is what the Saturn V could deliver to the surface of Mars.
Shorter reminds me of Voyager Mars. Before that canceled and moved over to Mariner 11 and Mariner 12.
This is. Let me just double check something. So if I remember something correctly. Yeah, so this is half of a T-72 on the surface of Mars. So this is effectively a mobile research station that is directly controlled. It is a tracked vehicle. It is kind of insane.
It uses half of the U.S.'s active RTG production line.
More like quasi-nuclear reactor. It probably would need its own, and like, I don't think you really can build an RTG that big. It would probably need its own internal, like.
Oh, I was thinking more along the lines of like having 20 RTGs. Sort of like how
it would probably have like
11 had
this
4.
weird. It would probably have a lot of small ones to help with dissipation, but yeah, it would be kind of a nightmare vehicle. But like, it is also invaluable and would make basically all the scientific discoveries we've made up to this point in one mission, because when you have just that much shit stapled to the side of your rover, and this thing will probably clock I need to actually talk to someone who knows this, but it probably will be going pretty fast, just because it's a fucking rover on the surface of Mars that weighs 20 tons, so make it very fast.
And I could already picture like the successor to that type of mission being like a giant, a complete fucking giant sample return that takes even the whole shit show that's the current program into shame. Like,
no. The successor to this is explicitly a manned lunar rover. Like, this is a precursor to a manned lunar rover that it will be replaced by.
So you don't need sample returns if you have a guy with a shovel to do that already.
Get 2 of these things and race them.
Yeah.
Any other interesting
But yeah,
proposals?
it'll
like,
be a fun
say-
one.
Okay. Any other interesting proposals? Like, say, the old Scrap the Grand Tour program, which was essentially
What,
like
sorry?
Super Voyager. I think
Yeah,
it's
I
called the
mean,
Grand Tour program. Like, you'd
that
have like a
might.
probe going to Jupiter, Saturn, fly by Titan. A second one that
Yeah,
does
I
what
mean,
Voyager 2 did. A third one that goes to Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto.
that I think that might happen in like timelines where like the wider TP like IPP is funded. So yeah, so it just depends on like what sort of like program we're able to get funded after the moon landing, because that probably would that would assume that you're doing like more more missions with Saturn rather than just like what we got OTL post Apollo 11. So it just
Right.
depends on the funding.
Mhm.
So like again, if you get like a regular IPP pass that basically guarantees like a second series of Saturn rockets manufactured compared to OTO, where just like there's just like one production run and then it was shut down. So like the second production run, those Saturns will have. I don't know what we haven't like jotted down the details, but at the very least they'll feature like those upgraded F1 engines, and so that will give it a bit more capability, a bit more cargo capacity, and you could also see it being used for like missions besides Apollo, like okay, a heavy probe to Mars, or like one of the expedition, or like a much heavier Voyager, like the original Grand Tour concept.
Yeah. Also, yeah, the Grand Tour, the big Grand Tour will probably be a very fun thing if you're able to do that. But yeah, TFF is going to be hard. That's the intended thing. So you probably will. I mean, I would even say there are some like presidencies where like anything besides minimum IPP is just not going to happen because the country has other priorities. And I think we should distinctly label that at some, like, when we bring out the game, we'll say, okay, here is, like if there's a path where there's like a limit on the amount of you could like theoretically do, we would say, okay, yeah, you can do this, but just know that you are locking yourself
Like, yeah,
into
you
a
can
minimum
have
IPP.
You can have Voyager, Mars, and you can have like a Mariner 10 type of thing, but you can't have like Pioneer H.
Well,
Yeah.
it means you're not going to Mars for a while.
Right.
The earliest, you can get is the 80s, and that's not because of technology, for the record. That's just because Mars is in the wrong position, and you can't do that. You just can't. There are certain there are certain times where you just can't go to Mars, really.
But
Its
Right,
orbit
transfer
and
windows
Earth's
and all
orbit
that.
just fucks up.
To be fair, it's also more that you have to remember a Mars mission is like 10 times as much more logistically difficult than like even a manned moon landing. So you have to be like consistently spending a lot of money to like stage everything, and build up not just the transfer vehicle, but also the habitats, what the astronauts are going to do on the surface. It's like a logistical nightmare, and that's the main reason why we haven't done it, because it would be
Also,
like
you need to
require.
know what you're like. You need to have experience doing all of that. You need to have done all of that in low Earth orbit a million times to do it anywhere other than low Earth orbit. Because in low Earth orbit, you're probably never less than a few days away from being back on Earth. But the second you leave Earth's orbit, that is there's no going back unless you've planned to go back. Apollo 13 fucking exploded and they were able to get them back. If that happens on a Mars trip, you're dead. Like, there's no helping you. Say your prayers, make peace with your God. Sorry, we can't bring you home. So,
And then
yeah.
if you want Apollo-style trial run, so like that would be way too fucking hard. Like compare like doing an Apollo 8 style mission to like I don't know, a manned Venus flyby or something.
Yeah, to be fair, I think there is a lot of merit in like having a Mars Venus flyby is like the direct precursor to a Mars landing. And there's like generally a good argument that most Mars missions would also include a Venus flyby, just because it gives you like, not only does it potentially reduce trip time, and it gives you more flexibility to like the launch window, but it also gives you the ability to like abort halfway through. Because if you swing by
Right.
Venus and you need to return home, you can just like do a burn at Venus to get back to Earth earlier than like a full Mars mission.
Right. That Voyage book that I mentioned, the final Mars mission actually employs a Venus flyby. On the way to Mars, which that reminded me of that.
Also, there's the bonus of a Venus flyby being very useful if you want to study Venus. Just shit out a little probe, can go do whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
like
little bonus.
telerobotically operated
Yeah.
probes. Okay, to be fair, I don't think you'd be able to actually have like functioning like rovers on Venus, like
Absolutely
functioning beyond like
that
an
is
hour.
not happening.
Well, no, that is possible if you are able to like fabricate electronics using like silicon carbide, which works up to like hundreds of degrees Celsius. But that like requires you to like go significantly far down the semiconductor tech tree. So, but again, who knows, like if NASA still has the electronics research center around and they decide, okay, we want to have a rover on Venus, and they say, okay, we need you to figure out how to make silicon carbide stuff, that might be a possibility. But like,
Can we make silicon carbide now, or is that still?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have made it in the lab, we just haven't really figured out how to like make it industrially. Or actually, I don't know, I have to do more research into it, but I do know that like one of the labs I was applying for in my PhD, they were trying to like think about how you can make semiconductors for space stuff or even in space. So if you have like space manufacturing, one of the things you could do is like try to make like non-silicon semiconductors in space. So that might be something the player can do if they've set up space infrastructure for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is another big theme of TFF is like, the thing about space travel is it isn't important for the space travel. That's a bonus. The thing it's important for is because to do space travel, you have to come up with all the cool stuff to actually get there. And that's where the benefits of space travel come from. And that's a big thing we try and represent in TFF is the genuine, like, insane amounts of technological change that come from this. For example, I don't know if you've heard of it, the internet.
No, the internet was more for like the Vietnam War but
true, but we couldn't do it without space travel. It would be impossible.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it would be kind of possible, but
database management systems have really only become really invented because of the Apollo program requiring them.
Also, another really good example, NASA actually ended up commercializing the first finite element analysis software called NASTran, and it's still it was used. It got widely deployed in the 70s, and it like saved billions of dollars of like engineering work for stuff like bridges, other infrastructure. That's
Can I
the
just
fact
say that
modern-
NASTran sounds like something you shouldn't be able to say? Like, that sounds like a slur.
It's just NASA plus Fortran. It's not.
I know, but I was just like, oh, that sounds like you're insulting somebody. I know it's not. I was like, oh, huh. But yeah, there's a million things that NASA did and does to this day that are they're the things that kind of go unappreciated by people like, I don't know, Elon Musk.
Yeah. If I will say that, like, in TFF, we probably will have, like, these weird, characters like Elon Musk, like, these, like, people who get involved in the space business who are, like, really, like, bad actors. Like, I know Misato previously mentioned Neville, that guy's just, like, a scammer, but I'm talking more, like, proper captains of industry, like...
And tycoon, man!
Yeah, like, people who want to, like, make their own, like, private space empire, and, like, your relationship to those people is, like, something you'll have to consider going into the 80s and beyond. Because in a way, the way I'm seeing it is, like, space in TFF is, like, one of the few areas where, like, it's kind of like virgin soil economically. There aren't... Sure, there are, like, established aerospace companies, but it's still kind of like a wild west. So that in that sort of, like, situation, there's plenty of opportunities for, like, these like, as I said, captains of industry to arise and carve out their own empires. Because, like, in most other, like, fields of the economy, you don't really have captains of industry anymore. It's just, like, BlackRock or these vast publicly traded companies. So, like, those people don't really exist anymore. Which is why like, figures like Musk or Bezos are really, like, kind of like exceptions to that, are like so interesting in a way.
Anything can be bought and sold with enough crude. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. It is ridiculous, these people, but they also are, important to the story.
Character, yeah.
So they get a say in it too.
And it's not just captains of industry. It's also other weirdos like Lyndon LaRouche. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but, like, yeah, we are all LaRouche patriots, by the way. Don't worry.
Devout LaRoucheites. Personally, I don't even know, man. I just hate, really, I think, is LaRouche's thing. Just hate. Hate and idiocy. Frequently found together, funnily enough.
I mean, the reason why I find, like, LaRouche so interesting is that he fundamentally is, like, a really, like, cursed evolution of, like, the mid-century, like, American futurism, like the techno-optimism of the 50s and 60s, of the Great Society, of the New Frontier. That basically, like, you take that, yeah, exactly. Welcome to the world of tomorrow. Like, you take that, you put it in a blender with a bunch of, like, insane conspiracies and right-wing crankery, and you get the LaRouche movement. And that's why I love it, because it is, like, such a quintessentially American phenomenon that is also...
Bread Enjoyer had a question, but I'll let you finish.
What's the different paths for post-Apollo, like Saturn MLV, Saturn INT, IPP, and the shuttle?
IPP's the big one. That's the one you get if you win.
Okay, so the way Misato explained it, so there's basically three different... there's different possibilities. There's, like, three different tiers of IPP. Like, the IPP one is, like, the best funded tier. That's, like, if you're really aiming for a manned Mars landing in the 80s and, like, a really sustained, deep space manned presence. So that's, like, full funding for everything. IPP2 is basically like, okay, we want to go to the moon to stay. We want to build up a permanent space infrastructure, but we're kind of putting off Mars until, like, we've really conquered the moon, so to speak. And then there's, like, IPP3, which is like, okay, yeah, we're going to the moon to stay, but we're not building that much extra special infrastructure. We're kind of, like, cutting costs. So that's basically kind of like modern Artemis. And then if you
also
can't
is,
get IPv3 passed, you get just the space STS, which is just okay. We're going to build like the regular shuttle, and we're going to build like 2 Skylabs, and then Space Station Freedom, and that'll be it. We won't be going beyond low Earth orbit until at least 2 decades. And then if you can't
it's also
even get that passed, then
Oh,
we have
God.
one other option, which we're not going to reveal at the moment.
Yeah, there's also yes, with IPP, it's important to note that like you can get IPP 1 and then fuck up and go down to 2, or get 3 and maybe even go up to another level. But yeah, Big Gemini. Big Gemini.
Yeah,
Oh,
Misato has. We have so many plans for Gemini because it is such a. Gemini, because it is such a versatile system, and it's honestly surprising that it wasn't used beyond the Gemini program OTL. Like, in this timeline, the Air Force has a larger presence in space, and the Air Force will continue to be using Gemini for their own, like, military purposes, like, for decades. It could end up being like basically the American Soyuz in a way.
have fun with it.
And there's so many, very different like evolutions you can come up using Gemini, like so we're actually really excited for that.
There's also some really dumb shit you could do. Because, there are always bad choices. That is a fundamental part of TFF. You can always mess it up. Think about what you're doing, buddies. You have to use your noggin in this game.
Oh, here's a question. I know here obviously space flight's going to be the most prominent thing about TFF. But is there also going to be stuff about like natural discoveries and innovations in space? Like say
we do want to
in the 60s you discovered the cosmic microwave background and gamma ray bursts and whatnot. Will that be touched upon?
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
Like another example, a more interactive example I could think of is like if like Discovery is the same, like Discovery is the same as OTL, and Kuiper Belt objects besides Pluto don't get discovered in the 1990s. Then you can start thinking about like sending a mission out there. Like, is that really possible?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because again, this isn't just about spaceflight, it's also like all of the impacts. So like we do want to have like a full feature in the game that like shows all of the things that you or other countries have discovered, in a way to like tie into the gameplay loop to show you what you're actually doing the missions for. So
right.
And like we do kind of want to keep pushing the player to like discover more stuff, because it's also like very rewarding. So and it'll be, and we can actually even like make it a bit more like narratively interesting. So for instance, what in the full game, when you boot it up and you look at like the discoveries, or like the science tab, it will show Venus as like a landscape of like swamps and dinosaurs or some stupid stuff like that, only for it to be changed once you actually send a probe there.
It's changed to hell. Have fun.
Or it turns out Mars doesn't actually have liquid water on its surface. Who knew?
Well, actually.
Okay, well, transiently, but like not permanently.
Yeah. I was more making the joke that later on you get to go, well, actually. They weren't entirely wrong, you see. They were just 99.823% wrong, which I guess is better. But yeah, it'll be weird. You have some weird things you can do in TFF. especially with Japan, especially with Japan's, they are desperate to be proven as a big boy. Because after World War II, despite having this massive empire, they also kind of get demeaned again. They are not as powerful as the other powers. They are the third major power.
The third wheel.
Yeah, they are the third wheel, and that makes them feel very insecure about where they are. So they have to prove that we are the technological center, and they are going to go to great risk to do this.
Yeah, like Japan in general, they're like this designated superpower with all superpowers, all like the weird tech. Like they would be the guys most likely to actually attempt building a nuclear saltwater rocket or an Orion drive, as an example.
Which, for the record, if you blow a nuclear saltwater engine up, you kill millions of people. Like, that would be the single greatest. That is 10,000 Chernobyls that touch the water supply. That is irradiating the entire surface of the Earth. Like,
to be fair, that's why you just like assemble it in space. You'd make sure all the parts wouldn't get anywhere close to each other on the ground. So,
well, no, the fuel is the radioactive part. So eventually you have to send that up, and eventually, you only the whole point of a nuclear saltwater is that you just are shipping a bunch of water with nuclear salt in it. You have to ship that at some point, and that is the dangerous part. You can build the whole thing in space, but you have to bring up fuel at some point. That's when you can kill, again, millions of people. Like tens of millions, probably. It would be. I cannot overstate how bad that would be. But if you get into space, that's pretty neat. Yeah, you can go to Mars in like a month, so that's fun. Yeah, so don't drop it.
Okay. Any other questions? Will the Germans have something like the shuttle? Depends on if von Braun is like either forced out or like made or like cut down to size, because like if von Braun is left to his own devices, he'll just keep building standard rockets until he dies. So
what's the furthest one can send a probe in the entirety of TFF? Like, this is definitely a far stretch, but is anything like Project Daedalus possible?
Probably no, not in TFF's time frame. But if you're talking about just like stuff like beyond the Kuiper belt, obviously, no, not beyond actually, if you're talking about stuff like, I don't know, maybe if you're like really lucky in one path, you could send like a probe up to 500 AU if you have like some crazy like nuclear like fission fragment or nuclear fusion reactor that. Maybe you could send a probe out to 500 AU and use the sun as like a gravitational lens, but I think that's probably the maximum you can go. Or I don't know if like that idea to like launch laser light sails to Alpha Centauri is remotely viable within the TFF time frame. And
I think the furthest you can bring a person is probably like
Jupiter or Saturn.
Yeah,
because
Jupiter
again,
would probably be the furthest.
If you have a timeline where you have like a nuclear fusion engine, you can do manned missions to Jupiter or Saturn, but again, that's like a maximalist timeline that won't be happening in most timelines.
And then you'd also have to deal with like getting there as well, because like I think it'd be much harder doing them a manned mission and back than doing, say, like a Galileo or a Cassini-Huygens, where you dance around gravity assists to go out there.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing about Jupiter is that you get the gravity assist of all time, which is, Jupiter. So it's not too bad, and if you're going with, you'd have to have fusion engines anyway. So like, you're dealing, you're kind of in an entirely different realm than the one you started in when it comes to your efficiency. But yeah, it's gonna be.
I will say with Jupiter, the difficulty with Jupiter is just like the radiation environment, because like if you go anywhere closer than like Callisto, you need like intense large radiation shielding. Saturn doesn't have that problem, so but on the other hand, it also takes longer to get there. So
Hey,
yeah,
just
it's a bit
drink
of a
some vodka.
trade-off.
It works in just drink some vodka and take some iodine pills. It works in Stalker. You could definitely get a. I like the idea of like the entirety of the crew to fucking Jupiter or whatever be shit faced out of their minds. That wouldn't compromise the mission at all.
You'd have to do the obvious 2001 references in that sort of case.
Yeah,
I
will say in general, no, actually, 2001 has been like a strong influence. Like it's a strong inspiration for what we're trying to go for.
Yeah,
definitely. And it's not just aesthetically; it's also thematically, because 2001 actually just have like a strong theme of like, oh, the militarization of space, and like the threat that humanity would end up destroying itself. Like people don't think about it that part of the movie that much, but it is there, and that is something we actually want to emphasize in TFF.
The part where the Americans don't let the Russians and whoever to their moon base because of the monolith and whatnot.
No. It's also the part where like where that scene where like the ape throws the bone and it turns into that satellite. That satellite is actually like an orbital nuclear like launch facility.
Okay,
And
yeah,
it is explicitly written out in the novel that like all of these nations have like nuclear or orbital bombardment systems, and like Dave Bowman like destroys one of them in the end at the novel. Any other questions?
Does the military like? Here, yeah. Does the military give a shit about anything beyond low Earth orbit or beyond geostationary orbit, or like say I know like Project Lunex was a thing in the late 50s. Like, is that still possible, or
probably just depends on what the other superpowers are doing. Again, like if the other superpowers are like setting up bases on the moon, the military would also the U.S. military also have like an interest of having a presence beyond the moon as well. And I do think there is one path where like Japan can explicitly angle for setting up a moon base earlier than the other powers, at the cost of like delaying their first moon landing. Again, that's just like an idea we had, but like yeah, there will be paths where like deep space will be militarized as well. It's in the long run, definitely yes, just because like the moon is like very strategically important. I mean, because again, like you can, if you look at what Gerard O'Neill was proposing, you can like use the moon as like a strip mine for like orbital industry and for and for that reason, it has strategic significance because Mars, nothing beyond like nothing like an interplanetary space, but the moon definitely would have, military significance.
Like furthest out I could think of with this definition in mind is like L1 and L2. I guess.
Yeah, those also would be significant just because, like, again, those are potential staging grounds. But again, we haven't really done too much research on the military side of things, so we still have to figure it out.
Another question. How does territorial claims outside of Earth work in TFF? Is there like any like outer space treaty that prevents any of that, or is like
No. Not
Okay,
among not among the international community. I don't know what the UN nations would decide for themselves. I mean, but I mean, obviously, like, I don't think there would really be an incentive to try to like prevent ownership on the moon just because all the other superpowers are going to be doing it. So like, why would you hobble yourself like that?
The UN itself might claim the moon. That kind of seems in line with what they would do. Like just a blanket.
Yeah.
United Nations in and of itself owns the moon. It's our property. The collective of nations,
and I assume that there's like, well, is there any possibility of like anything more extreme in that regard? Like say some inciting incident causes like the entire solar system to be like scrambled up for claims that are completely unenforceable?
I kind of feel like it's going to be an Antarctica situation where everyone has all these claims that contradict one another, but no one does anything about it because you can't.
I mean,
I would
Alright.
say like Germany might claim like Mars as like Aryan territory or some bullshit, but nobody will care.
Okay, for the moon, maybe not. If like commercial space really takes off at some point, there might be some interest in the moon. So who knows? But yeah, for anything outside of beyond the moon, yeah, no, there wouldn't be a reason for it because again, there's no like real economic incentive for space colonization beyond the moon for the foreseeable future. Like, there's no reason why you need like a economic settlement on Mars. A research base maybe, but nothing more. Like, honestly, the whole idea of like colonizing Mars, it was always kind of a pipe dream, and I don't really know what would change that. Maybe like I guess like if we lived in a world that was more like the expanse, but maybe that would change. But like in like anything approaching like a grounded timeline, you wouldn't really see any incentives for Mars colonization.
Like the moon is an incredibly valuable resource. There is a lot up there that makes sense to exploit. Mars is just too far away, and we just don't have until you can crack a fusion engine that is like
the Epstein
practical.
drive. That's such a crisp name, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the Epstein drive. Do not bring that up around the uninitiated. They will call you. They will probably get very suspicious of you.
Come on, everyone knows the Expanse. It's like
Epstein drives a little St. James.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait till they hear about the Von Rape drive. They're gonna lose their mind on that one.
no, the Durlavanger drive.
I don't think it's in the. It isn't in the cards for TFF, which is a shame. But because it would be like at the very earliest the 2050s idea. But I do see that one warp drive proposal actually working. It does kind of make sense. I don't know what it would do to the crew inside of it, but I think it might work for like an unmanned vehicle.
Okay, if you're talking about like pure FTL, I'm of the opinion that instead of like trying to warp through space, it might be a better idea if higher dimensions exist to just like launch yourself on a ballistic trajectory through like the bulk or other higher spatial dimensions. So something
Well,
something like a jump drive, because like I don't know, the
yeah.
Alcubierre drive has like too many like significant issues for it to be like just for me to see it as viable in the long run. So that's why I kind of like if we're talking about Magic FTL, I kind of favor a more jump drive sort of thing because
Like
that's
the
Oh, yeah,
warp
the
from
Alcubierre.
KVK.
You don't necessarily, if you warp space, you don't necessarily doesn't mean that you're gonna travel faster than light. You can use it to warp space just to go
slower than like
faster, but still slower than light.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I also would say if we ever like get to making warp bubbles, I feel like it would make more sense to have something more like the mass relays from Mass Effect, where you just have like this large space station that a craft flies close and it gets a warp bubble generated and like flies off. I think it makes more sense than like an independent. I don't know, like having independent warp drives for everything, but like this is all super hypothetical.
Yeah. If you can go faster than the speed of light, which is an if. I mean, warp, not warp, but like wormholes, I guess, if string theory is true, could be possible, but also it could just kill you.
Yeah. I mean, I
That's
will
always
say
the problem. Who knows? These don't just like do like yeah, these could be theoretically possible, but they might also just kill you when you do them anyway.
And it's not like relativity doesn't really matter for the actual passengers trying to go like across the galaxy. Like if you travel like 99.9% the speed of light towards Alpha Centauri, you're gonna get there in no time. I'm in your mind. The problem is that the people on Earth is gonna say like, oh, 4.5 years passed.
Though I will say, like, the amount of energy involved to accelerate to that speed is like planet destroying. So that is kind of one notable issue. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. I will say, like, with my whole jump drive idea, that kind of is built on the theory that like gravity is so weak because it like leaks into higher spatial dimensions. So if our universe is just like a 3D brain in like a higher dimensional space, it would be you could just launch yourself into that high dimensional space and then get brought back down into the universe through gravity. So that's what the jump drive idea is. But again, that's like super hypothetical. We don't know if higher spatial dimensions exist or if you can like escape our 3D brain.
Going back to the whole ownership thing, one example I could think of is like, would would the equatorial nations try to like claim their portions of a geostationary orbit? Like I know that was one proposal that happened in the 80s, I think, which is like the only ever thing against this outer space treaty.
I don't know how enforceable that claim would be because that OTL claim was built on like, the United Nations, the war, like the post World War II paradigm, but that doesn't really.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and also there's the fact that like it has already been established that like a nation's airspace does not extend into space because a satellite can overfly a nation without it being considered as like an airspace violation. So they have no legal basis to assert that claim, unfortunately. Like, oh yeah, one fun fact: one of the reasons why Eisenhower insisted on the U.S. First launching a civilian satellite is just because he wanted to establish the principle that a satellite could overfly any nation's territory without permission, so that would allow the U.S. to like legally deploy spy satellites without them being automatically considered as like violating airspace. So, yeah, that's an interesting tidbit. But yeah, once you have like that principle that like the space above a nation's territory is fair game, you can't really assert a claim to geostationary orbits.
It's gonna be a fucking shit show. Everything in space is gonna be a shit show. So, good luck.
Okay, I completely expect this to be like spoilery, but I assume that there are definitely crises that can happen in space that lead to nukes flying on Earth.
Nukes, I think we're gonna basically say I think we're basically going to say, for the sake of gameplay reasons, there's not really going to be a timeline where you nuke or things get nuked, just because it wouldn't be fun. You can't have that happen. Cooler heads will always prevail. Maybe later down the line we'll put a setting in that lets you make that true or not. But as for stuff in space, maybe.
There is one. Okay. There is. Okay, I'm not going to share too much
Well,
about
no,
it.
we've talked about that actually.
Yeah,
No, we talked
Space
about
War.
it. We talked about
I was
Space
on the
War.
TNO team when you guys talked about it.
Yes, Space War is a philosophical discussion of conflict. Also, really fun. Also, will ruin your game, like, permanently. Like, Space War, do not do Space War. Space War is bad. But it's fun! I don't think there's really anything else we should say at this moment, since we don't really know what Space War will be besides bad for you. Again, don't do Space War. Anyways, I think. Does anyone have any last questions?
Is there gonna be like a like different like ways, like the various shuttle proposals, like designs? Is it gonna be a way to like change which design, or is it gonna be kind of set in stone?
Oh, you're gonna have almost full control over your shuttle, basically, is the current envisionment of it. Because the shuttle is a very important thing. You get to make a lot of decisions that, like, for example, you'll be able to choose what you're going to make the shuttle out of. Titanium is one of your options, which is really expensive, but has hidden benefits. Because in his book, in Kelly Johnson's personal autobiography, he makes a few very good arguments, basically saying, at Lockheed Martin, we were on course to make a breakthrough with titanium. He fully believed that. He fully believed that they got at the end of making the SR-71 Blackbirds really goddamn good at working with titanium. It isn't a mystery metal. You just need to be able to have a big enough press, and you need to be able to work it right. But you can make it relatively affordable. It's not some magic metal. And that I'd of course go into more research on that and see if he's full of shit there, which I don't think he is. He's a pretty reasonable guy. But in that case, you might make a breakthrough on that. You might not. It makes your shuttles a lot more expensive, of course, but also it means you can bring the estimated savings to just the structural components alone was 15%, which is big. But you also don't have to worry. The safety is the big thing, because if your skin is made out of titanium, if your heat shielding breaks off, there's a lot of evidence that would suggest you're gonna be okay. Because there were two separate instances where a piece of the shuttle shielding broke off, and it was steel, and the steel was able to survive re-entry. Titanium is way, it's I think 300 or 400 or 500 degrees higher in the melting scale than steel. So you've got a lot more room to play with that. It makes your shuttle a lot safer. And that's just one of the examples. There'll be a lot to do with shuttles. This is a good time to bring it up too. Currently, we have a I think we might. Originally, I was going to call it Gremlins, but after watching again, which if you guys haven't ever played it or seen it before, you guys should go and play South Scrimshaw. It's really cool. It's a free visual novel on Steam. It takes like an hour and 30 minutes. It will make you cry. It's really good. It's about a whale on an alien planet. It's very fun. Anyways, back to the main point. Yeah, so after what we were originally going to call it the Gremlin system, I'm thinking we should call it Space Bunnies as a reference to that. But it's a way to represent problems coming up during development or flight or execution, and basically, it's a good. It represents a few different things that can happen. Delays. It represents design flaws. It represents actual flaws with like making something, or like how NASA used to bake all of their electronics before sending them to the moon to like 200 degrees Celsius, which ruined all of the electronics. Which is why we didn't get a Ranger until like Ranger 7 when they stopped doing. Literally, they kept doing it, and then they eventually were like, "Okay, we're not going to cook this one," and it worked perfectly. Why I don't know why they did that. It was a really stupid idea, but yeah, you get these little guys that pop up and you have to deal with them, and or you get to ignore them in some choices, because sometimes, yeah, you do want to ignore it. Sometimes it is not worth pursuing this because it's not that big of a deal, it's not that dangerous, and it'll be a judgment call. And also, currently our depictions are most likely going to be incredibly brutal for these cute little characters as you remove them, because I think that's funny. Yeah, but that won't be in the demo, probably.
Here's another question. How non-negligible will SETI and METI be in TFF?
I'd like to represent SETI. There is an ongoing inter-team debate about
Yeah, so here's the thing, fun fact, Frank Joseph Molina was a hardcore SETI advocate, and I think his son, who is still alive, is as well. And actually, fun fact, I have been in contact with like Molina's family because his grandson is like doing a PhD at my university, and he has spoken to his family, and they are actually quite interested in the project because they really want Molina's story to be told. So I'll actually be able to talk to his family to figure out like the SETI stuff, because I think that is actually something could be quite important, because like Molina OTL advocated for constructing a radio telescope on the far side of the moon. And one of the reasons would be specifically so we could search for like potential techno signatures, because if you're on the far side of the moon, you don't have to worry about all the junk signals from Earth, right? So
And then I could think like in TFF and also in TNO, you'd also probably have a much harder time doing stuff like, say, the frequency from hydrogen emission. Yeah, that's going to be cloudy as hell because Germany and Japan wouldn't give a shit.
what do you mean by?
I would actually say Japan does care about the environment to a degree, at least on the global warming front, simply because they don't like using oil. They still really don't have great oil reserves, and also
To be fair, Germany has the same issue, and I don't know. I think with
Germany has coal.
Oh, I mean, instead not in, when I mean emissions, I don't mean that. I mean like what the frequency for hydrogen that shows. Now the one that's deliberately set aside because they think that'd be good frequency for alien contact.
Yeah.
To be fair, I don't see why any power would use that frequency, just because like there's enough scientists interested in like SETI for that to happen no matter what. Like even in Germany, there will be like some weird people who I don't know, think Aryans are descended from like aliens or something, and so that's why they want to set it aside. Like Like,
Okay, fair enough.
I
There's
do
some
want to
weirdos in
explore,
Germany,
like,
if you could tell.
I will say that, like, I do want to explore like some of like the weird, the funny, some of like the funny occultism or pseudoscience associated with like Nazism in some German past. Like, I think Himmler himself, it won't be too much of that because I think people kind of exaggerate how much he like really believed in that. But his successors who like have drank his Kool-Aid definitely will be like, I think there will definitely be like, if like Himmler becomes Führer, like some of his successors could end up becoming like, you could have like some really weird like return to monkey like eco fascia cultists taking control of Germany after he dies. Like,
Oh, also,
it'll be fun and horrifying.
Von Braun, for the record, is despised by Himmler, and will. We've talked about this before. Will basically be under constant Stasi style like paranoia inducing surveillance. Like, they would literally do shit like switch his drawers around just to fuck with him because Himmler just hates the dude. And he can't get rid of him for political reasons, but he hates the dude. I really don't understand why, but Himmler hated von Braun. Like, he tried to get him killed multiple times. Which, you know, if Himmler's one of the guys who dislikes you, you might be doing something right.
I have a question about the Mars mission.
Yeah.
Is it gonna be like where some countries prefer it to be launched from the moon? Some want it to be from orbit, and some want to be from Earth, then to Mars directly.
I don't really think there'll be any scenario. I don't think there'll be any scenario where it's like directly from Earth to Mars. That's just like kind of infeasible. You always need to use someplace else as a staging ground. I mean, to be honest, there's part of me that thinks that I don't really know also why you initially use the moon as a staging ground, just because you have to send stuff all the way to the moon, and initially like
you build the rocket on the moon, then you launch it to Mars.
Oh yeah, that's like a very late game thing. Once you actually if you actually have like a lunar settlement, for like any initial attempts at Mars, we'll just be building stuff in orbit, probably using like a space station as a staging ground, and then sending it to Mars. Like, obviously, if you have like, you know, space colonization of the moon, then it would make sense. But without that, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, manufacturing on the moon will definitely be a thing if you are lucky. Because it makes the whole system a lot easier, and you know, there's enough hydrogen, there's enough stuff, so there's not really much of a technical problem. It's just actually building the damn thing. Also, you can build basically everything to be a balloon tank, which is nice, because it's so much lighter on the moon.
Going back to the SETI thing with Himmler, like, yeah, I can imagine like those Kool-Aid drinking successors being like, let's build an Arecibo telescope so we can tell the aliens, hi, fellow Aryans and whatnot.
But was Himmler, what was it about Himmler that made him hate von Braun?
No idea.
I think it's just because like Himmler had like the thing was about Himmler is that he in a way saw himself as like the arbiter of like science. I think he saw himself as like the arbiter of science in the Reich, to the point where like he actually didn't believe in like Jewish physics, and even like defended Heisenberg because he thought that like his research would lead to like, you know, powerful technology. So in a way, and Himmler also tried to take ownership of like the rocket program, during World War II, but then like and it was like the site of like this power struggle between like Himmler and Goering on one side, and then like Speer on the other, over who would control like the rocket program. So I think that's why Himmler dislikes von Braun, because Braun was like aligned with like his political rivals, namely Speer.
Oh, Speer.
So which does Himmler object to going into space, or?
No, actually, Himmler has like his own like ambitions for space. Like, it's my idea that like so one of the actual like really weird beliefs he had was that the ancient Aryans had like very advanced technology, to the point where like a lot of like Germanic myth was just like like distorted memories of that. Like, he thought that the Germanic deities were like mortals that wielded like very advanced technology, like Thor's hammer with like a Tesla cannon or some other lightning gun. So that's why I have the idea that in TFF he's come to believe that like Mars was the site of like an ancient Aryan colony, and so he sees it as, and in general he thinks that he cares a lot about like, conquering, settling like Germans in space colonization. Like, this is like a deep belief for him that, the Germans must expand further and further. So a lot of his path would probably be just like doing stuff like delaying the initial race to the moon, so you can spend up more time building up infrastructure for like, space colonization, Mars missions, because that's what he actually cares about. Like, he wants to go straight towards Mars and like, space stations for habitation and stuff like that.
That does make me wonder, actually, regarding advocacy of space. Who are the big advocators against spaceflight and TFF that you have to worry about? Like, say, I know there was that one MIT president who didn't like astronautics and instead thought NASA should have just gotten a hand with satellites.
Well, in the US initially, there's like this one senator named William Proxmire who like categorically opposes like all significant attempts at like space exploration, because he thinks it's just like a big waste of money. Like,
right, I know he opposed the Vietnam War for similar reasons. And he had the whole Golden Fleece Award that NASA won, the NP, the National Park Service won, etc.
An asshole.
I will say, for the US, like, actually a more serious, like, actual, like, much more thought-provoking and serious opposition is like from like, okay, there's opposition to like stuff like Apollo from the scientific community, because they think that it's kind of like just it's more like just for the glory or for the show, and it isn't giving enough like yields of actual science. And it's because, at the time, a lot of like a lot of these efforts were focused on, the idea of like, oh, these military people flying out to conquer space, but like more scientists kind of had a rocky relationship with like NASA in the 60s. It got better afterwards, but like there were some tensions, and I think even more like serious and thought-provoking opposition would come from like the civil rights movement and, certain progressives who fundamentally don't see why the US should be spending so much money to put a white boy on the moon when there's so many people, so much injustice and so much poverty back on Earth. They think it's just like a distraction from these deep-rooted social issues that are like, would require a significant investment to resolve.
And I assume, as if in scenarios where commercial space flight takes off, you sort of start to see some people argue, say like, "Oh, NASA is in the past now. Why do we need NASA? Why do we need NASA to make like these giant space telescopes that cost too much money when we could like make these private companies do the same thing for so much cheaper?"
Yeah, that would be a significant issue if commercial spaceflight like really gets off the ground. Like once that happens, there will be like always this crowd saying, "Oh, what NASA's doing, it's not worth it anymore," and that could lead to significant issues.
It would be less an argument of NASA shouldn't exist. It's more an argument of NASA should just buy
Space
satellites.
FAA.
Yeah.
Is there any notable
And that-
figures in Germany who are sort of like that too? In regards to like not being sort of against spaceflight in general.
I don't know, just because like of the way German culture. Though I will say that Germany isn't. There wouldn't really be figures like against spaceflight. You just have to define what sort of spaceflight you're talking about, because like Germany will always see space as like the high ground that it has to conquer or at least contest for national security reasons. But like, do they actually care about the scientific aspect? Like von Braun certainly doesn't. It's all like a romantic endeavor to him, but he doesn't actually care that much about doing science. Like Germany's probe program exists only to like help the manned program and nothing, and get like a few wins and nothing else. Like, uh, as long as von Braun is in charge. So yeah, again, the weird thing about Germany is because of like how like what the regime is like, they can keep investing in space exploration even if the regime itself is like rotting from within, because it is, the space is seen as like a way Germany like extols its superiority to all other nations, and like you know what I'm talking about. Like,
They don't have the civil rights issues to deal with.
no, but it's also, even if they resolve their civil rights issues in the most brutal way possible, so why would they care?
Yeah, that it's like it's not about civil rights. What about civil wrongs?
Yeah, exactly.
What are some non-chemical rockets that you make?
Non-chemical. I mean,
I mean, not
obviously,
like nuclear and non-conventional.
obviously, you'll always have like nuclear thermal. You probably also will have nuclear electric. That's actually, I think, the German, and my idea for the German Mars program is that they would build something like that. Like mushroom-shaped, like nuclear electric vehicle that you saw in like the Von Braun Disney trilogy, but like the ones I'm talking about, like from the Collier magazine article written by Von Braun. Let me show you what I'm talking about. But that is like Von Braun's like lieutenant, like confident Ernst Stuhlinger was like a strong advocate for like nuclear electric propulsion. So I think that's what Germany would go for. Uh, Japan. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Japan would have the choice of nuclear electric or like nuclear thermal. Again, we have to figure that out. Where is it? Hey guys, I'm also going to have to go pretty soon, so okay, but yeah, look in VC text. That's the one I'm talking about. That was my idea for what the German Mars vehicle would be like, and because we want to get all biblical with it, we'd probably call them like arcs or something.
What will the German like naming scheme for vehicles be?
Misery.
It's kind of arbitrary, whatever the propaganda office thinks sounds the coolest. Internally they have like the most boring names imaginable for everything. Like initially the moon their version of Mercury is just like fuck, what would it be, like the the Raumfahrer project or something, like astronaut project, and then you'd have I don't know, Gemini would just be like orbital project, and then Apollo would be just like moon project, like that sort of like stuff. So obviously once they make their activities publicly revealed, the propaganda office would come up with like a fancier name for it.
Gives us similarities to the Soviet space program, albeit without the propagandic cool name attached.
I mean, I I don't know, because like
I'm thinking
Again,
like
I wish
Luna and whatnot.
I guess in a sense, like even Germany's first satellite is just called Trabant, which is just like the German word for satellite. It's very unimaginative. So in that sense, yeah. And that's just that's just supposed to clue you in on, like, the German mindset, but
I think that's all we've got time for, because I've also got to go.
yeah, it was great talking to you guys. I'll
Yeah, it's
turn
nice
this
learning.
record-
Mm-hmm.
We'll
I'll turn the
probably do
recording
another
into
one
like
of
a
these in
video to
3 months.
upload. Mhm.
Should do it on a weekend next time.
Yes, probably. We'll see.
Yeah, Misato had limited availability, unfortunately. Okay. Good talking to you all.
Same.
Bye.
See
See
ya.
ya.
Bye.